When did someone challenge you, not realizing your power level was over 9,000? When we were having a couple of drinks on Friday after work, I was challenged to a little marksmanship challenge by a colleague. Little did he know, but I've been shooting BBs competitively ever since I was 13. That's not to say I'm the greatest, but I've made it to the national finals for my country multiple times and came 3rd and 6th. I have all the special clothes and gear and such that you need to make it to such a level. The next Saturday, we showed up at the range that I always go to. It's not a day I usually train, so luckily not many people recognize me. And I whooped his butt left, right, and center that day. Out of 600 points, he scored about 200 to 250 if I remember correctly. I got about 580, which is around the average of what I used to shoot. He had to buy me a fancy bottle of whiskey, and now we shoot every 2 to 3 weeks together. Fun times! Kind of the reverse for me. I'm a physical education teacher, and I had a student that took a pretty bad tumble in class. Hit her head on the wall. Pretty clear concussion symptoms. So we get her stable, call mum and dad to come and get her. Dad shows up and I start going through the concussion symptoms and treatments with him, letting him know that a doctor's visit is probably in order. Anyway, I ramble incessantly about concussions for some time and then he just politely nods and thanks me. He takes his daughter and leaves, and I see my principal standing behind me and he can barely contain his laughter. Turns out the dad is an emergency room doctor. And he just sat there while his daughter's gym teacher gave him medical advice. My friend used to ride a unicycle as a kid. He worked construction and they were working at a house that had an old unicycle. The other workers tried riding it and immediately fell off. My friend walked over to it and inspected the unicycle like it was the first time he'd ever seen one of them and said it didn't look that difficult. They all laughed at him and he said he thought he could ride it. Eventually, one of them bet him $100 he couldn't, and he jumped on and immediately rode it down the street. Okay, my power level is by no means over 9,000 on this. I'd probably rate it in the 1500s. But I've played chess since I was a small child, and I was the best player in the middle school chess club. The guy who owned the pool hall that me and my juvenile delinquent friends hung out in was talking about how dumb kids are these days, and said that he bet that nobody in my group of hoodlums could play chess. I beat him soundly, and then again in the rematch. Aha, the Anna Kramling effect. I do get some enjoyment from watching this unassuming Swedish lady beat every old chess dude that underestimates her. Good on you, I hope you bet that guy money. The property management company for my homeowners association insisted that I received emails that I never received, so I asked them to prove that I'd received them. They said they're sure that I received them. I'm a software engineer, and at the time I'd just finished an enterprise email delivery system, like an in-house constant contact. I knew the rules of the CAN-SPAM Act by heart. I knew exactly how their system worked. So this real witch of a property manager said, "I know how email works, you wouldn't understand." I mentally did the arrogant knuckle crack and started to explain, very methodically, how email delivery works and how they'd track various actions. I spent about 5 minutes detailing my credentials and why I was absolutely certain that they'd never sent me the emails they alleged that I'd received. When I was finished, the HOA board just agreed to waive the fines. I work for a company that notifies customers of deadlines by email. We get customers who claim they never received the email, so the deadline should not apply to them. When a customer opens one of our emails, we know exactly when, unless they've disabled automatic loading of images in their client, so I can tell them, you opened the 30-day warning email on May 8th at 7:14 p.m., you opened the 7-day warning email on May 29th, and again on June 4th. But you didn't click the link until September 24th after you opened the 7-day warning, and then the original 30-day warning 3 minutes after that. And then you clicked the link and received the notification that it was past the deadline. They never respond after being caught in a lie. Medieval Fair 2002. The carny running the fencing game picks me out of the crowd for being tall and challenges me to a bout against the master. Not a lot of people fence, so his gambit probably worked most of the time. But when he handed me that saber, I handed him his butt. When you're pretty good at something moderately obscure, these are the kinds of things you daydream will happen to you. My father trying to explain to me how computers and the internet work after he's called me over to figure out why his computer and internet aren't working. A guy from work challenged me to a tennis match. He must have been a hotshot back in his day, and to be fair, as far as mid-40s go, he wasn't bad. I, however, was national team and whooped his butt 6-0, 6-0. I would have eased up, but when I warned him I'm pretty good, he'd laughed it off. Look, I'm far from an expert, and I'm far from power level 9,000, but I've been told jujitsu doesn't work by several froggy drunk dudes. And it works. It always works. Went to a couple's night once, and the guy had wall-to-wall movies and framed posters in his basement. Super into it. I mentioned I used to be a movie nerd, but not so much anymore. He challenged us to a movie trivia board game, kind of in a condescending way, and I tried to politely decline, but my girlfriend insisted we play. They went first, missed the question, and then we ran the table. Never heard from them again. I'm an Academy Award-winning sound mixer, and almost everyone on film sets thinks they know my job better than me. Written in 2020, it happens a lot lately. I'm a microbiologist, so the number of people who've suddenly taken an interest in the subject in order to be confidently wrong about it is pretty upsetting. I have perfect pitch. It's not a thing I can turn off. Notes simply are a pitch clear as day, much like how red is clearly distinct from green. Anywho, music class in junior high. Teacher explains that Mozart had perfect pitch and walks over to the piano, plays a note and says, and just by hearing it, he'd be able to tell you what that was. Now, can any of you do that? At the time, I honestly had no idea this was a rare thing. I raise my hand. Teacher, with a smug look, points at me and is gobsmacked when I answer correctly with note and octave. He then figures it's pure luck, so does it again and asks me to face the other way. I answer correctly a second time. Tries it with chords, sequences, and 2 hands worth of notes. Still right every time. It ends with me playing back a short sequence after listening to it blind. And that day I learned that perfect pitch is actually kind of rare. A beginning writer asked some advice about a basic drafting method, so I offered my point of view. Some tough guy decided to butt in and say that what I said was proof that I'm not a real writer, and that it was obvious that I'd never be published. At that time, the 2nd or 3rd book in my trilogy was about to be released. I asked the guy not to tell my editor that I wasn't a real writer. While I was in high school, I was the reigning city fencing champion in both the youth and adult tournaments. My high school decided to do a school-wide fencing unit for phys ed, and the coach they brought in to teach all of the students was my actual coach. During my classes, my coach naturally brought me up to help demonstrate the various moves, but for some reason, one of my classmates didn't understand that I wasn't chosen at random. He started talking crap about how I looked like I didn't know what I was doing, and how he could probably kick my butt in a duel. Now, he actually was pretty good for a guy who'd never fenced before, and the first opportunity to actually have a bout, he decided to have a go at me. I picked him apart and did not give up a single touch, and used the opportunity to practice my parry and ripostes. I admit I took a bit of sadistic pleasure in thoroughly beating him. Afterwards, my coach made a point of congratulating the other guy for doing so well against the city champion, which changed his attitude considerably. There's our second story about an unassuming hero being a master swordsman, just like you see in certain fantasy films. Must have been fun for everyone else there to see a real scenario like this go down. My father-in-law challenged me about the capabilities of DVD. Specifically claimed you could only have widescreen video, not 4:3, on a DVD disc. At the time, I was employed as a DVD author. I authored the very first commercially available feature on Scenarist. I'm literally acknowledged in the first edition of DVD Demystified as an expert. I had already by that time personally authored literally hundreds of DVDs with 4:3 aspect ratio. He knew all of the above at the time, yet still insisted that I was wrong. Oh god, most of 2020 so far has just been this over and over. I'm an infectious disease expert, PhD from a microbiology and immunology program, and suddenly all of my former high school classmates think they know more than me. They watch the news and learn a new vocabulary, and they bestow themselves a doctorate. I've been wrapping my family's Christmas presents since a very young age. It's the perfect activity to focus my crippling perfectionism with my overall anxiety-riddled self to create a beautiful masterpiece that would make anyone think twice about discovering the mysteries beneath the colorful paper and bows. I've always just loved to do it, and my mum was more than happy to not spend hours wrapping presents. Flash forward to the company Christmas party in my late 20s. We're split into teams to compete for random prizes. I'm up for the next game. I had no idea what I'd be doing. I see a big cardboard box, a necktie, wrapping paper, scissors, tape, and a bow. I know what's about to go down, and I'm here for it. It's a blind present wrapping challenge. My competitors start talking about how they can wrap presents fast, and I sit there silently staring down that cardboard box, knowing fully that the crowd is in for a show. Blindfolds go on. We have a partner that isn't blindfolded that's supposed to give verbal directions. Just before the timer starts, I lean over to my partner and say quietly, Are you ready for this? She just says, "What?" Bam. Timer starts, partner tries to give directions at first, and quickly realizes that I'm way ahead of her. Before anyone else can even get their paper cut, I've got my box wrapped, taped, and bowed. I even fold the ends in fancy to have the triangles meet. And that, my friends, is how I earned the most satisfying $10 Starbucks gift card of my life and earned the title of Rap Master. My roommate, who took Psych 101 class at a prestigious university, told me, a master's-level therapist, that the movie Split with James McAvoy was an accurate depiction of multi-personality disorder. Ah yes, many often forget that people with multi-personality disorder can spider climb up walls. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I'm no expert, but people never assume I can play pool. I grew up with my parents going to the pub, so as an early teen I'd play a lot of pool and I got pretty good. There's been a number of occasions where I've gotten us a round of drinks or stuck it to some jerk who's hogging the table. Someone once tried to insist that our state didn't sell booze on Sundays. I've spent over a decade working in restaurants, and I'm also an alcoholic, which she knew about but still insisted on arguing with me about it. Well, I'm a veterinarian and I know how to prevent fleas. I get these Karens saying, "My dog is itching and it's not fleas." Okay, but your dog is infested with them. It's not fleas. I'll run a comb and show them hundreds. I empathize with the doctor in Happy Gilmore now. I used to play fighting games competitively all over the world. Never made it to one of the top slots, but I could usually hold my own. One of the best games ever was Super Street Fighter 2. Went to a bar by work one day, and they just so happened to have a SNES set up with SF2. I order a drink, pick random characters, and just mess around for a bit. Some guy comes in and immediately starts bragging to his date that he's the best SF2 player ever. I asked him to play some games against me and offered to buy him a drink if he could beat 2 out of 3. 12 games later, I'm completely hammered, and he finally gives up and leaves. Still don't remember getting home that night. I'm not power level 9000 or even an expert or certified, but there's a specific kind of cargo parachute called a small airdrop training bundle. I can pack those correctly and buy the book in less than 15 minutes. I was challenged by someone who had 5 years experience on me to see who could pack the most in an hour. I had 6 while he was trying to argue with the quality control guy, who'd been packing parachutes for 20 years, over how correct he did step 3. I had a good day beating the guy who just so happened to be the worst rigger in the world. Well, I wouldn't say I'm an expert at push-ups, but I've worked in the fitness industry for 20 years and work out myself pretty regularly. Doing 20 push-ups is nothing to me. I was at a party that was attended primarily by what I would call hipsters. A guy who'd been drinking a fair amount challenged me to 20 push-ups as fast as possible for $20. I won and I got $20. Then another said he'd do the same bet if we went right away. I guess thinking I was kind of tired. I beat him and got another $20. A few minutes later, another guy did the same thing. It was an easy $60. Well, this one's gonna date me, but I was an undergrad when the video game Halo was released. I never really played a lot of video games, but at the time I had a boyfriend who was really into it. We played, like a lot, even went to some college-based tournament games and did well. Fast forward some years later, and my husband and I are at a house party. Someone turns on the Xbox and was looking for a 4th for Halo. My husband volunteers me. The guys were visibly not thrilled, but play along. I wiped the floor with them. Eventually, they decide to team up 3 against me. I still destroyed them. The whole party ended up crowding around us to watch. It was a great night. Haha, yeah. It's funny what comparative experience feels like. I didn't have an Xbox, and I spent most of my after-school time getting absolutely destroyed on Halo by my friend. Then, when we went to a tournament, still feeling like I was bad at the game, I realized that actually I was at least in the upper half of Halo players in our age group. It's funny what perspective can make you feel like. Although it seems like you were on a whole other level, as being able to beat 3 journeyman players, who are all teamed up against you, is pretty good. Pool water treatment isn't very difficult even for the average Joe. Trust me, you don't need to pay someone $100 a month to treat and clean your pool. I love listening to the salespeople at Leslie's, a local chain of pool supply stores, educate me and their other customers. I got into a polite discussion about algae one time and I was told that I was wrong. I explained that I knew what I was talking about. He asked what I did and I responded, "Industrial water treatment." He's very nice to me when I go into the store now. Me and my buddies in the 7th and 8th grade loved GoldenEye. We had sleepovers where we spent every waking second from 5 p.m. till 9 a.m. the next day playing, with no sleep at all. We were convinced that we were the best, but had no real proof because we were only playing against people in our school. Big fish, small pond kind of scenario. Fast forward about 6 or 7 years, my college holds a GoldenEye tournament. Haven't played it in years, obviously. Well, there was a giant problem. My friends and I had always played with inverted pitch on. The issue was that GoldenEye in multiplayer doesn't let you select different control styles for different players. Everyone has to play with the same control scheme, so I was stuck with my controls being upside down. I still won the tournament. I got absolutely rocked in the Mario Kart tourney, but I had my GoldenEye badge. Okay, I'm being told that I'm a big dummy and you can individually set the controls. So for some reason I wasn't able to in that tournament, but I remember the timed mines round was absolutely bonkers as a result. Journeyman electrician here. Had a guy demanding I can put lights in his house without cans. These were not the canless kind either. He just straight up didn't want to pay for cans. Even bought the lights by pallet on some massive sale. A real cheap idiot who wouldn't listen to anything I said about safety or legality. I walked out and told him good luck with his inspection. So it's the Saturday after Thanksgiving a few years ago, and I'm out with one of my old college friends and her extended family. We'd just graduated the year before. We post up at a bar outside of the game. Everyone's pleasantly mid-afternoon buzzed. Her uncle, whom I hadn't met previously, asked what I do. I hated answering this question in 2017, especially with middle-aged adults, because they would invariably try to start something. At the time, I worked at an immigration law firm. Predictably, as soon as I tell him this, he asks what I think about the wall. I give him my usual answer: bipartisan immigration reform, Gang of 8, yada yada. He tells me not to give him the rehearsed crap, he wants to hear what I really think. I say, oh, I don't really want to get into it, let's just enjoy the game. But he keeps pushing and I've had a couple of beers, so against my better judgment, I engage. This maybe 50-year-old man becomes furious as the discussion carries on because I keep citing court cases and how our immigration system actually works. The kicker is at one point he says, just because you have all these statistics and citations doesn't mean you know any better than me. I just gave up and got another beer after that. Color. It sounds weird, but anytime the color of something comes up and someone tries to correct me. I've been a commercial printing press operator for 20 years. I can spot very subtle differences in colors that most people can't. I am a climatologist. Say no more, fam. It was honestly like a movie. When I was in college, you were limited to only a few guest passes, so it was pretty common to ask people on your floor to sign in friends. So late at night, while we were playing Mario Kart, someone knocked on our door to ask us to sign in their friends. We didn't really feel like going down all those stairs and dealing with them, so we hesitated. That's when he said, "If I beat you in Mario Kart, will you sign them in?" We of course agreed. Little did he know we all played every day all semester long. He was really convinced he'd beat us. We placed first, second, and third, and he ended up in 12th. We still signed in as friends, though. Not quite this, but I learned piano years ago. I bought a keyboard and learned the first movement of Moonlight Sonata, but it was literally all I could play. I just started a new job as a chef in a fancy hotel. I'd been there maybe a month and was at the Christmas party. I sat at a piano and the head chef pointed at me, laughing and said, "Hey, look at John, you can't play the piano." I thought, I'll just act confident and play the only thing I can, so I was like, "Yeah, I can. I've played for years." And he said, "Oh, really? Play Moonlight Sonata then." It couldn't have gone better. He was gobsmacked, and I've never told anyone there that I was actually crap at piano, except for that one song. Let me see. Krull, the arcade video game. A guy tried to hit on me at a house party by challenging me to a game, but he knew he'd made a mistake when I said, "Sure, I haven't played in a while." It was my boyfriend's house and his game. We still had fun playing, though. Solving a Rubik's Cube. My friend bet me $10 he could solve a cube faster than me. He solved it in 1 minute, me 30 seconds. In college, Mario Super Strikers for the GameCube. I loved my GameCube so much as a kid and actually ended up bringing it to college with me. I had so many people that wanted to play or would smack talk about how good they were, only for me to beat them over and over. I have a friend that I beat 30 times in a row over the course of an afternoon, and he swore he'd never play with me again. 5 years later, and he still hasn't. Okay, so the back end of the comments for this video are just absolute video game superstars. We get it, you proved your parents wrong, it can come in handy one day. Take that, Dad. A friend of mine challenged me when I said the dusty bits on the floor below their air conditioner were because they needed to clean the filter. They insisted that it was ash coming from outside through the air conditioner because of fires that had been going on nearby. It was a split-system AC. I work in HVAC. At least once I explained how their unit worked, they conceded. I have a PhD in genetics and I've published multiple papers on viral vectors spreading in a large population. Every frickin' anti-vaxxer and COVID conspiracy theorist. Ugh, I'm so sick of them. Also, when someone I met at a social event found out that I work in a genetics research lab, he asked the following question. If 2 white Americans go to China and have a baby there, will it come out Asian? I was so shocked that I actually spit out my drink. Oh, this happens to me a lot. I had the unique situation of working in manufacturing in China for 7 years. I moved back 3 years ago and constantly have people explain to me why manufacturing could easily come back to the States. And I emphatically tell them that they are frickin' stupid. Female mechanical engineer. My life is pretty much people challenging me on things that I'm an expert on. Cycling. My younger brother has a personal vendetta against me. Tried to tell him riding 100 miles is not easy. He said, "Man, I can do 100 miles." I was like, "Okay, I stay with you the first 50 miles," and he didn't even make it past 10. Ha! Truckers, what creepy things have happened to you while you were parking overnight somewhere? Pulled over for a break on the way to Melbourne from Sydney at a truck stop. No streetlights or anything, pitch black. No other trucks or cars at the stop. I turn off my lights. I switch the truck off, do the curtains, lock the truck from both sides, jump into bed, set my alarm, and set my phone above me in the compartment. I was rolling over from side to side for around 5 to 10 minutes. I couldn't get to sleep due to it being prime summertime temperatures, reaching around 30 degrees at night. I'm looking up at the ceiling, mentally planning out the day ahead. Suddenly, the passenger side door opens up slightly. Cabin lights turn on. What the frick? Now, the truck is a fairly late model and in pristine condition, so there's no question about door being faulty or anything. I just sat there for what felt like an eternity, expecting someone to come up and see me sitting there with the solid rod in my hand we use for tightening belts. No one came up, nor was there any noise at all, just quiet, eerie silence. I grabbed my torch and jumped down, walked around the truck. No other trucks were around, nor were there any cars. It was just me and my fully loaded B-double. After around 5 to 10 minutes of getting screwed around with, I locked up and went to bed again. Woke up the next morning, yawned, fixed myself up along with the bed, opened the curtains, and FML, there's a cemetery next to the stop where I parked. Hunger and laziness all escaped upon realization. Grabbed the keys, screw-putting my shoes on, screw-putting pants on, switched the truck on, and just got the flip out of there ASAP. I have an Aussie story for you. My friend's dad was a trucker out of Perth, and this is the only story I've heard that's really given me the creeps. So he's driving back to Perth in convoy with a mate of his, back to back, through the Nullarbor. If you know anything about Aboriginal legend, the Nullarbor is where the ancestors' spirits walk, and also prime Yowie country. They radio each other because they realize they need to rest up and decide to sleep through to dawn and make Perth in the morning. So they pull over in the middle of the vast nothingness, lock up, and hunker down for the night. At some point in the blackness, my friend's dad wakes up with this intense feeling of being not just watched, but stared down. He's not a superstitious guy either. He's a proper no-nonsense countryman. He says he just had this gut feeling that something was out there and wanted him gone. He says he scrambles up to the cab and checks his keys and turns his lights on. And at that exact second in the middle of the night, his mate does the same. Both trucks roar into life and they take off down the highway without a word spoken between them. Later, his mate says he felt the same predatory state and fear for his life, so hard that he'd have just gone too. I don't know how true it is, but it's a good story and pretty creepy. I understand that in the past my faux Australian accent has led to some mixed reactions in my previous videos, which delights me. However, I really didn't think it could stand up to 2 longer stories from Australia in a row. I'll get you next time, Aussies. I used to haul saltwater off of well sites in Oklahoma on the night shift. I was standing at the rear of my trailer as I was loading out in BFE somewhere when I heard gravel crunching like someone was walking toward me. Got that feeling where you feel like you're being watched. Stepped around the trailer toward the sound and shined my flashlight at a cow licking the side of my trailer.
I am cow, and when it's late, and all the men have parked their freight, and when I find a man who's stuck, I walk right up. I lick the truck.
Back when my dad was a truck driver, he stopped to sleep in a lot one night. The guy he leased his truck from happened to see him parked there, and in the morning when my dad went to the restroom, this guy used a spare key and hid in the sleeper. Once my dad was on, starting to leave, the guy reached out and grabbed him. My dad said he freaked out, so he just bailed out of the truck. It was moving around 5 miles per hour. My boyfriend is a truck driver who routinely does midnight runs. Oddly enough, I asked him this question myself a few days ago. He told me that one night he was getting ready to park in a lot next to a truck stop. He said it looked like there were no lights, no cars, no sign of anyone, but he said, screw it, he was tired. He woke up the next morning parked on the side of the road with 3 highway patrol vehicles behind him. He was about 15 miles away from the truck stop he had parked at. Thing is, he was sleeping in his camper the whole night. He has no idea how he got to the side of the road, and logic says someone tried stealing the truck and succeeded. And the police convinced him of this happening as they saw a man in a black jumpsuit running away from the truck into a nearby field. Even then, he still feels uneasy about the whole situation. Apparently, the doors were still locked from the inside, and there was no real sign of anyone trying to break in. Just a few extra details I thought I should add. The police did breathalyze for alcohol, and it came up clear. Even more unsettling is that he puts his keys in the same place every night, which is next to his handgun in one of those metal boxes, which remained untouched. Also, the police officers could not locate where the man in the jumpsuit was, or could have gone. It was an open field with no building in sight. And they didn't actually stop the truck or see it moving. The only reason they decided to check on the truck was because of a call they received from a worried woman. Everyone was weirded out, couldn't really issue any real fines, so they let my boyfriend leave. 2 stories. Maybe not winners, but creepy overnight parking for sure. I was really new to the business and had parked at a stop in Texas en route from one place to another. It was August. There was nothing unusual about the situation. I was in the middle of a parking lot with about 70 other odd truckers. I woke up with a start 6 hours later to the truck shaking and rolling, hellacious noise all around, and a psychedelic light show blasting me from every direction. It was a severe thunderstorm that I'd no idea was coming. Wind, pounding rain, thunder, and lightning to beat hell. Being in a truck during a storm is closer to being in a tent than in a house. I'd never experienced it before, and even though I grew up with this kind of severe weather, I lay there in this tossing, heaving sensory party going, I don't even know where I'd go right now to get safe if I had to. Hell, I don't even know how to find out if this is a severe or regular or a tornado. I was really tired the next morning. I parked for the night somewhere in southwest Michigan on the way to Grand Rapids. Again, a truck stop full of trucks. Shut down and went to bed. I woke up looking at one of the cabin lights, which was on. I think, fell asleep with the lights on again, genius. Then, freeze. The light I'm looking at only comes on if you deliberately turn it on, which I never did. Or if the door is open. Just then, I felt the slight roll of the cab that's telltale whenever someone is climbing up. I wish I had some heroic Rambo crap I could claim I did, but I can't. I yelled. Now, I can make myself heard in a very loud environment pretty easily, and this was the dead of a quiet night, and I yelled, "Get out!" loud enough to send Legion into the Gerasene pigs. There was a frenzied scrambling, and the truck rocked some more. Then I hear a very small woman's voice, "I'm sorry, I got the wrong truck." Nothing from me for a second, then, "Are you okay?" "Yeah, just get the F out of here." Moral of that story, lock your doors. She was either a driver or a working girl, and it doesn't matter because either way, she got the wrong truck. Loud enough to send Legion into the Gerasene pigs is my new and favorite way to say something is the extreme opposite of silence. I was at the Petro in western Memphis. I had dropped a loaded trailer and bobtailed to the truck stop and parked in bobtail parking at the Petro. I was pretty tired but hungry, so I went in, got a meal and walked out and opened the door to my truck and started climbing up. I looked up right into the face of a guy grinning at me. I was in the wrong truck. I had parked next to him. We both drove for the same mega carrier, so the trucks were identical. He had watched me go in and knew what was up. We both had a good laugh about it, and I went to my truck and crashed. If the storyteller is anything like me, the realization of the mistake was probably preceded by at least 20 seconds of high-pitched screaming when he climbed into bed to a grinning face. No, thank you. A couple years ago, I was sleeping in my van in North Hollywood after getting off of work. I had the seat folded down and a long plywood plank with a mattress on top of them. So I was elevated at the windows level, but they were tinted. Woke up one night and was startled by a guy standing outside staring into the van and talking to himself. I realized he wasn't trying to look in, but was looking at his reflection. I don't know how long he had been there, but he was there for another 15 minutes until he staggered off. Have a trucker story from the extended family. An uncle used to drive a lot and he always came back with the most weird stories ever. While every family member knew his stories, there was one story he told and warned about, even to me when I was 6 or so. Moral of the story is to never stay the night in the desert alone. It seems once he drove to Chile, he had a contract, and the way there was okay. I made the travel myself later in life. It's beautiful. Whenever he was done, he usually spent a few bucks on booze, but this time, due to the family gathering, he wanted to come back as soon as possible. So instead of drinking in some bar, he decided to sleep a bit at the Atacama Desert. Well, it's a desert, and he had parked way outside the road and a few miles before the next village. He sleeps and wakes up to someone singing. He's confused and thinks it's the radio, but the radio is not on. Then the singing stops and it sounds more like a scream for help. That's when he wants to get out and help, but he is still confused. He said he started the motor and the lights to see where and who was there, but he also did open the window a bit and yelled, asking what happened. It was nothing, and right then when he decides to get out anyway, he catches a movement in the corner of where the lights end. It looked like a woman, but the face was pitch dark. He freaks out and drives away, non-stop until he reached home. Whatever he saw or thought he saw, every time he told the story, his face went pale. Even my grandmother commented on how he was usually a very jolly guy, but whatever happened in the Atacama Desert freaked him totally out. Like most people here, this didn't happen to me. One of my good friends from middle school had a stepfather who was a truck driver for a good amount of time. He was a tough son of a B-word. I never saw him not look like he could kill someone. Except one time when he told us why he stopped driving trucks. He was on a long trip from somewhere down in Texas to Boise, Idaho. By the time he hit the freeway close to Boise, he had already been up for 24 hours. Either way, I don't believe he could have seen this coming. Outside of Boise, he was driving, late at night, at the fastest legal speed, when out of nowhere he sees someone sit up straight in the middle of the road. He didn't have enough time to hit the brakes, not that it would have helped. She was decapitated on the spot. He later found out she was tweaked out. I don't think even if he wasn't sleep deprived, he would have seen her lying in the road. From what the police could gather, she walked out there, sat down, and eventually fell asleep in the road. No one knows who she was or how she got that far out. One of my trucker friends has a story about spending the night alone in a rural stop in the middle of Maine winter. She had a bit of an uneasy feeling about the place but couldn't put her finger on anything and needed badly to rest, so she stayed. Perfect Stephen King setup, right? She's usually a very solid sleeper but wakes up around 3 a.m. that night. She's not sure what woke her up, until she notices that the cab is very slowly and gently rocking side to side. She can also hear an intermittent, soft sort of rubbing sound that corresponds with the rocking. She was a seasoned trucker already at this point, but really wasn't sure what this was, and all the ideas that came to mind ranged from the mundane, but alarmingly unsavory, to the outright paranormal. Terrified, she creeps up to look in the side view mirror to see what's out there. Turns out some moose like to lick the road salt off semi-trucks. I hope that cow from the earlier story feels really validated by this factoid. Not a trucker, but I drive a lot of miles in a company truck from my oil field company. I'm on call 24/7, so I'm out at all hours. One night after a long day on a location in the Oklahoma Panhandle, which is rather remote and sparsely populated, I was driving back to the town where my shop is located. I got too sleepy to drive and decided to pull over and to nap until the sun came up. So I pulled off the 2-lane highway down a country road and parked on the other side of that road. It's safer than pulling off on the shoulder of the highway, and no headlights to bother you. This was and is common practice for me. I left my pickup running and turned the headlights off and leaned my seat back and fell asleep pretty quick with the AC on low and the radio turned off. I slept pretty good for maybe an hour, and then I guess I was having strange dreams, so I woke up, but just kept laying there because I was groggy. The wind was picking up and sort of shaking the truck with random strong gusts. Lots of wind in Oklahoma. Eventually, I started to imagine I was hearing whispering or murmurs, but I attributed it to the wind and my sleepy state, or maybe the radio still being on but low volume. I kept hearing it, so I sat up and turned the headlights back on to look around. The lights illuminated the dirt road to my side and in front of me. About 50 feet in front of my truck and extending down the road into the dark where my headlights faded out, were maybe 20 coyotes all milling around and sniffing around the gravel in the road. Their eyes were reflecting the lights. Coyotes usually run from light and avoid humans and their noise at all costs. There was no fear in these coyotes, and I was sort of struck by how many they were, all standing in the road. They eventually moved off into the dark as a group. I wasn't really afraid as I was inside my truck, but my feeling was an uneasy one, so I got back on the highway and went home. After reading through a majority of the comments on this thread, my curiosity was piqued, and I called my mum up to ask her if my great-grandfather, a trucker during the 60s, had ever told a creepy story of being on the road. To my surprise, she said there was one story he told her as a cautionary tale. It's not about parking overnight somewhere, but I thought it might fit in here just the same. He said he was driving through somewhere pretty rural, a small town with a few houses here and there. As he was making his way down the road, he saw a large cardboard box tumble down a hill and come to a stop pretty much directly in his path on the road. It was too late for him to brake, but why would he? It was just a cardboard box. It's not like it would hurt his truck if he ran over it, so he kept chugging forward. At nearly the last second, he said something came over him, and he immediately swerved to the right to avoid hitting the box. When he looked in his rearview mirror, he saw two little kids scramble out of the box and back up the hill. It's amazing what little kids in a small town will do for fun. I still feel sick to my stomach after hearing my mum tell that story. All the time. The worst might have been an incident that happened while back in Indiana. I was just parked for a 34-hour reset, means you can't drive for 34 hours so you can get a full 70 hours of driving back. It's the hours of service that allows us to drive and counts our hours, just outside of Chicago. Now, for all you non-truck drivers, right out of Chicago in Indiana is probably the first place you learn about not stopping if you can. Drug dealers, lot lizards, working girls, theft, the whole 9 yards. I didn't have a choice. I had nothing left at all for hours. So I sat. That night, I heard someone messing with my truck in the back. I sat in my truck while I heard this continue for 2 hours. I would much rather deal with it in the morning than go out to see what's going on and getting robbed at weapon point. Woke up the following morning to see my fifth wheel handle pulled. Means if I drove, I would have unintentionally dropped my trailer I had attached, and my glad hands, the lines that connect my truck to my trailer that provide me with braking capabilities, completely missing. Worst of all, they undid my frickin' catwalk like savages and ran away with it. My father-in-law is a trucker in Australia. He told me a story one night in the middle of the outback. Not a soul in sight and hundreds of kilometers between towns. Australia is huge, especially on the west coast where we are. Pitch black night, a tire blows out. He pulls out the shoulder and starts the task of changing. Feeling uneasy, he keeps looking over his shoulders. Something isn't right. Working fast, telling himself to stop being a scaredy cat. Then, all of a sudden, a hand lands on his shoulder. "Hey there, mate. You have a spare smoke?" An Aboriginal man was right next to him like it was a normal thing. In the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the night. He says, "Nah, mate, I don't smoke." So the man just walks away into the darkness. He reckons he aged about 20 years that night. Nothing too creepy, but I've parked in a few less than desirable places. The first was next to P&G in Kansas City on the edge of the ghetto. Nothing happened, but it was still freaky at the time because I was fairly new. Yes, I've had a couple of bums or lot lizards knock on my truck, but if you stay quiet, they just move on. I've heard random bumps in the night, but never really worried about it. I heard a story about a police officer in Chicago or New York making a trucker move his truck so that he didn't have to deal with a homicide in the morning. What is it about Chicago in particular here? Adding that onto my list of places to avoid for future travel. Let's get back to spooky. I was driving overnight in a very low-populated area. Due to circumstances, I was seriously sleep-deprived. Driving in a poorly lit stretch of woods, my headlights started to cast shadows through the rails on the side of the road and started playing on the trees on either side. It looked and felt like I was driving across an ocean. Then the hallucinations started. When you are seriously sleep-deprived, you'll start to see shadows flicking across the edges of your field of vision. Shadowy figures started appearing on the water next to the road, swimming alongside me. They looked like monstrous mermaids jumping in and out of the water. The Dutch roads are notorious for having very few truck stops that actually have space for a real truck. So I drove for another hour taunted by these figures. First truck stop I pull into and ready myself for a nap. I wake up a couple of hours later and one of the figures was in the cab with me, looking at me. I freeze, terrified for my life. I couldn't move until I calmed down enough to start noticing that while it seems to be moving and breathing, it doesn't seem to move much. And then I realize it was my coat, slung across the seat. Panic subsided and I used the adrenaline rush to drive the 2 more hours I had to go. Other time, less spooky but creepy enough, a truck stop I was parked at was infested with lot lizards. I had already seen some of the less lizardy types get into trucks. I was reading a book when suddenly I hear my handle of the passenger door being pulled. It was locked, luckily, but that didn't stop the unseen puller try to open it. It stops for a second and I suddenly feel the cab swinging a bit, like someone was on the ladder. Up comes this horrible visage of rotting, missing teeth with a balding forehead and so much eyeliner it could be called face liner. She mimes giving me a particular adult activity, but I refuse. She jumps off and I see her storming off, furious about something. Most of the other truckers were laughing at me. She was well known amongst the local truckers for her wiles. This is the scariest story here, not because of the hallucinations themselves, but because I learned I may be sharing the road with people who are operating 40-ton vehicles at 60 miles an hour while severely sleep-deprived. I used to drive trucks in northern Manitoba. There's a road in the northeast you can drive for several hours and see very few vehicles. This road is quite flat and straight in stretches. Of course, this is deep in the bush. One day I saw something cross the road in the distance. Very large, easily past the hood on my truck. But not long like a moose or elk, just tall. It disappeared into the bush, and as I drove by the spot, the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I heard days later a tow truck driver describing on the radio his encounter with a similar creature. Only he was much more clear that he had spotted Bigfoot. This guy went to some length to explain he didn't want people thinking he was crazy, but he was sure what he saw. I asked an Aboriginal client of mine in a nearby community, and he said the elders spoke of them as commonly the same way they spoke of other animals. I don't know what I saw that day, but I'm certain it wasn't a bear, moose, deer, or elk. I just don't know what the hell it was. What is the best "karma is a B word" moment you have witnessed? I'm from San Diego, and during the summer you have to claim bonfire pits on the beach really early in the morning if you want it for that night. So, my friends and I got to the beach at 8 a.m. and stayed there so we can get a bonfire going into the night. Just before sundown, this one couple asked if they could share the bonfire with us, and since our group wasn't too big, we decided to share it with them. However, that couple proceeded to bring a group of about 15 others, and they literally surrounded the pit and pushed us out. We were really annoyed, but we were so tired from being at the beach all day, so we decided to head out. Little did we know that that night had an extreme high tide warning, and when we moved all of our stuff over the wall that divided the beach walk with the beach, a huge wave came in and washed out that whole group surrounding our bonfire. The wave flipped over their table of food, took a handful of sandals back into the ocean, and destroyed all of their stuff. The best part was this one girl was trying to jump the wall to save herself, but she didn't jump high enough and ended up falling right back into the water. Karma is a B word. I was in daycare as a child. I had very long hair that my dad always put into a ponytail. There was a girl that would pull my ponytail all the time. We were doing a musical chairs thing at the end of the day while parents were picking us up. The girl was behind me and kept yanking my ponytail. I kept telling her to stop. The teacher
Didn't see anything, so I can't do anything about it.
There were a bunch of parents waiting for us to finish our game, my mum included, and she kept doing it and the teacher
Didn't see it.
So I turned around and punched her as hard as I could. She stumbled into the cubbies where we kept our coats. The teacher tried to chastise me, and my mum was like, "Nope, didn't even see anything. Didn't even get into trouble." I was running laps on a grass field in the military when I was about to lap a guy who'd always lap the crap out of me. So as I passed him, I yelled, "Gotcha, B-word," and immediately stepped in a hole in the ground and twisted my ankle. Despite the pain of jacking my ankle up, I thought the karmic payout was hilariously timed. That fool. YouTube fail videos have long since established that taunting your opponent seconds before the finish line basically guarantees some kind of karmic payback. My old manager was a monster. Belittled people, made a hostile environment, denied everything that would make coworkers happy while giving herself every comfort. Even denied me a half day to go to my mother's funeral, adding, "Would it be a big deal if you couldn't go?" He finally stepped on his own member after he wrote up a fictitious counseling statement about someone and the entire office revolted. The manager wasn't fired like we wanted, but he was relieved. So in comes the new manager. Very well regarded, 20-year Air Force veteran, retired at E9, humble guy who knew how to handle people. We have our first awkward team meeting, old manager bitterly in attendance. As the new manager is giving his "nice to meet you" speech, he sees the D-bag glancing around the table, trying to intimidate people. He stops talking, pauses for a few seconds, and then says, "You know, when I was in the Air Force, I learned that if you take care of your people, they'll take care of you." He then stared directly at the old manager and said, "If you don't take care of your people, they'll take care of you." Sitting on a state highway late at night because of a bad car accident. The highway was packed and barely moving. One guy thinks he's smarter than everyone else and tries to drive on the shoulder. He makes it a good little ways before running into an on-ramp, also packed with cars. He had nowhere to go and no one let him in. He was stuck between cars in the rightmost lanes and cars from the on-ramp. Everyone stuck bumper to bumper and flowed around him. I went from watching him pass me and almost getting out of my view to passing him and losing sight of him in my rear view mirror. My dad told me a story once from when he was younger. He was in traffic in a two-lane, two-way road. It was backed up in one direction, heading into an event of sorts, but there was sparse traffic going the other way. My father starts seeing this tool in his rear view who would pull out from the traffic into the oncoming lane, drive as far as he could before a car started to approach from the other direction, and then get someone to let him back in. After doing this a few times, he gets up to my father when he needs to get back in. My father doesn't budge, and the guy has to throw it in reverse and back all the way up to the end of the line. Of all the fantastic things my father's done in his life, and all the lessons he's taught me, if I've taken one thing away, it's that I will never let that guy in. I love highway justice. My husband and I like to call people like that the D word of the mile, because there's always one. As much as all the other figures on this compendium deserve the karmic justice they were handed, these individuals who believe the rules of the road apply to literally everyone but themselves are particularly satisfying, aren't they? When I was a kid, we visited Montreal. I had gotten a hockey puck as a souvenir. While we were in our hotel, my sister decided to mess with me by hiding it. I got mad and yelled in my high-pitched voice, "Give me back my hockey puck!" before smacking her in the head with a pillow. Guess where she had hidden it? As a parent, I don't even think I could get mad for that. I was coming out of work from a nightclub in New York City in 1993. A friend and I were walking toward the train station when we heard an older lady screaming, "Help! Help!" We saw a guy running away from the screams toward us with a woman's purse in his hand. I don't know why I did this, but I pulled out my work ID badge. Plain work badge, not a security badge. I was just the DJ. The thief must have thought I was a cop, and he immediately throws his hands in the air, and without a struggle, he throws himself to the floor. I told him to stay laying on the floor or he will be pepper sprayed. I had no pepper spray. A few minutes later, the cops show up and arrest him. The old lady was very grateful and was mostly worried about her pictures of her family she had in her purse. Bad guy got instant karma and didn't even get halfway down the block with the purse. Driving to Chicago, and a crazy guy is road raging, swerving erratically while yelling about shooting us. He zooms off. 5 or so miles later, we see his van upside down in the ditch. He's standing on the shoulder talking to a cop. You should have pulled over and said, "Hey, about you threatening to shoot me back there. Sorry, but you were going so fast I couldn't keep up. But hey, you're welcome to give it a shot now." I got rear-ended in a turn lane by a girl texting. She was doing 45 miles per hour, and I was stopped. No major injuries. I went to her court date hoping she got a big fine or something. She got a $50 ticket. I was a little bit upset. As I was sitting at the stoplight to pull out of the court, I watched her run a red light and T-bone a cop. I don't normally laugh at other people's misfortunes, however, I laughed my butt off on that one. When I was driving my Jeep very carefully in a snowstorm and someone in a Mustang passed me in an unsafe manner, he almost lost control of his car, which would have caused an accident that included me. Picture someone dangerously fishtailing right in front of you with an 18-wheeler coming at you in the other lane. Saw him in the ditch 5 minutes later. Idiot. Seems like he started as he meant to go on. I suppose I really should have guessed how many of these were going to be car and road related. Here's a similar story with a dash more coincidence involved. This same thing happened to me in London with a sudden snow flurry. I was driving down a hill and my car was sliding towards parked cars, so I was taking it slow. The guy behind me was driving a Land Rover and tooting at me to hurry up. Ended up overtaking me at speed. Got home a few minutes later and the guy is sitting on my garden wall with a gash on his head. His car had crashed into the central bollards. I asked him if he wanted to come in and wait for the emergency services, but he was too embarrassed. Couldn't help myself and told him he was driving too fast. He said he thought Land Rovers were made to handle those conditions. I work in an ER, and once a girl got brought in by an ambulance after being assaulted. She was walking down the street when some guy tackled her to the ground and tried to drag her down an alley. A good Samaritan managed to chase him off and call the cops. Like 20 minutes later, they brought in a guy in full cardiac arrest. Turns out the police found the attacker and chased him several blocks to where he collapsed, and his heart gave out. He was dead on arrival, and the victim ID'd him right in the ER. I was kicking a customer out for being racist and cursing at one of the employees. He yelled offensive stuff, and then he tried to slam the door on his way out. But it had one of those things that make the door close slowly. He pushed it hard, but it didn't budge, and he slipped and fell on the floor. We had a good laugh. The correct name for that thing is a door slowly closer.
A door slowerer?
Americans call boingy decelerate hallway blockers door slowly closers. When my ex-husband, who stole $4,000 from me to go visit his mistress in another country, called me to beg for money. Actually, my credit card number, as if, because his lights got cut off. The other day, I was taking my dog for a walk around the neighborhood. She squatted down to take a poop, and I reached for my doggy bags only to realize I was fresh out. So I peeked around, making sure nobody was looking, and I just left it. 10 minutes later, I'm walking across the road, and I cut through a thin grass median in the center, and what do you know? I step in dog poop. I wasn't even mad. I knew I deserved it. When I was in my first grade, my class had recess, and this bully pushed me to the ground. I fell and was about to go off on the kid when this fourth grader came over, lifted the kid up, and took the kid over to the principal. Karma is the best. A very similar thing happened to me when I was in first grade, but there were a few key differences. The bully wasn't alone. There were 3 second graders, one of whom was the leader. I kicked his goons' butts before he took me on himself. They started it. I was on the monkey bars and they came up under me and started twisting my legs, so I fell. The guy who ended up saving me was in 3rd grade, not 4th. He didn't take the bully to the principal, just carried him a few feet away and dropped him. The guy who came to help me was my brother, which was interesting because he was usually the one giving me a hard time. It's the older brother Maxim. The only people that can beat up on my younger brother is me. I was at a party one time, and this one girl couldn't stop talking crap about this other girl that was coming to the party. The other girl shows up, and this dude picked her up and hugged her and spun her around in a way where her foot kicked the girl that was talking crap right in the face while she was sitting on the couch. Her beer spilled all over her, and she caught a black eye. Every script or so, there is one story in particular that causes the narrator to spit out his drink all over the screen, laugh outrageously in public, or have to stop for a solid 5 seconds while he wheezes with laughter. This was that story. Happened to me at work. Meth Head was trying to pay with like 1,000 coins for a $5 scratch-off. She tried to say she was only 10 cents short, ended up being over $1 short, then complained and said any decent person would have spotted her the money. Pretty much told her she could go down the street and try there if she'd like. She pulled out a 20 and bought 2. As she walked out the store, she said, "Karma is a B word." When she got to her car, a cop pulls up behind, blocking her in. They proceed to search the car, then arrest her and her boyfriend. It was hilarious. F her. So let me get this straight. She tried to buy a scratch-off using a bunch of coins, got mad when nobody gave her $1, and then pulled a 20? F that B word. A classmate in school broke one of his legs and was using crutches. He was about to go down the stairs and another kid kicked one of his crutches down the stairs. I walked down there and got his crutch for him, and while walking back up, the kid who kicked the crutches came tumbling down and I moved out the way. The kid broke his arm. Did you hear that?
Yeah, it sounded like someone fell down the stairs.
No, it was actually the sound of sweet, sexy karma returning the favor. Last Saturday, I was on a crowded NYC subway at 2 a.m. 2 drunk dudes, young 20s, lighting a joint and walking around flaunting it. One literally came up to me, "You think a weed head ain't gonna smoke a joint?" Whatever that means. The whole train kept ignoring them and they kept parading around being a bunch of morons. They spotted 2 taller, athletic-looking dudes and started making fun of them for looking like cops. It was the line, "Which of you is the sergeant?" that finally put the athletic guys over the edge. They looked at each other, smiled, reached into their pocket, and pulled out their badges. "Okay, boys, empty your pockets." The subway blew up in laughter. They would have gotten away with everything if they just didn't go bother the 2 plainclothes police officers. Score 1 for the good guys. And then I went home and smoked up a joint myself in my living room. I worked as a bartender at a bowling alley. For some reason, one of the other bartenders hated me. She was constantly poaching people on my side, horseshoe-shaped bar, so we each got a side. We split tips, and whenever it was her turn to count them down, I know she wasn't splitting them properly. Tried to get the scheduling manager to put her on my days, etc. One of my regulars even said she caught her pocketing tips and not putting them in our communal bucket while I was working with her. Well, tournament season started, which everyone dreaded/looked forward to. Dreaded because the shifts were twice or 3 times as long as normal, and there was a constant rush of people at the bar. Looked forward to because shifts were 2 or 3 times as long as normal, and there was a constant rush at the bar, so we'd make about as much in a day as we did in a week. Well, the first tournament was teams that she considered hers. They bowled on her side on days she worked, so she knew them well and was looking forward to their tournament tips. She came in, saw that I was scheduled to bartend that day, and flipped out. She started ranting to the manager, who happened to be the scheduling manager. The owner pretty much said I was one of the better bartenders, so I was getting put on the tournaments, and if she didn't like it, she could just leave. My co-worker left, and then I got to work her normal shifts as well. I was working in a pub in Liverpool and had just arrived about 10 a.m. to start my shift. I knocked on the door and waited for someone to let me in. I became aware of some voices shouting and turned around to see 2 guys, shirts off, swaggering towards me, talking in a language I didn't understand. They came right up to me, and whatever little English they did speak came out. They called me a frickin' working girl and a frickin' B-word, etc. Nasty stuff, and I was really quite scared. I was knocking on the door really hard at this point, but after insulting me and laughing, they walked off towards a busy road. I watched as they walked out into the traffic, waving their arms at the cars to stop for them, then giving the drivers the finger. Suddenly, one of the cars stopped and 4 big guys got out. One of the nasty dudes ran off, but the big man got caught and shoved hard against the car a couple of times, clearly hurting his head and elbow. Then one of the guys made out that he was going to punch him, big time, drawing his fist far back. The little crap just covered his face and screamed. They didn't get hit, but the car guys and a lot of passers-by burst out laughing. They let him go and he ran away. That felt good. Nothing better than watching highway vigilante justice from the comfort of your own vehicle, huh? I hope at least some of the drivers had a packet of crisps to consume with the show. My dad kicked our dog because it was standing in front of the fridge and he wanted a beer. But as soon as he opened the fridge, the shelf that was holding the beer fell off and every single can busted open. Woman on a cell phone runs me off the road, flips me off for laying on the horn. She was going right and I was a ways back going left. A van was in front of her at the red light and she just plows into the back of it. I slowed down as I passed with the window down. Running me off the road wasn't enough to get your attention, huh? She flips out. I laugh and drive off into the sunset. You might have considered giving your contact information to the driver of the van. I was a witness, I saw her talking on her phone while driving, and saw her ram into your stopped vehicle, and will be happy to tell the same to your insurance company. My brother was making fun of an old man slowly shuffling across a parking lot. Look at Speedy Gonzales, or something, and 2 seconds after, he, my brother, bashes his foot on the cement parking barrier. He limped back to the car as I laughed hysterically. Every winter when my family and I would go skiing, if it was snowing on our drive up or back, there'd be an idiot soccer mum or dad driving a Suburban on worn-out all seasons, going 50 plus in the snowy lane, not the one people are driving in. It's always incredibly satisfying seeing them either pulled over or in the ditch. I made the mistake of pulling them out twice. Never again. They are never grateful and never admit they're an idiot for driving so fast. The last one, once I got them out and unhooked them, jumped in the Suburban and in order to make it move on the snow, floored it, achieving not much more than throwing snow behind them and making their already bad tires worse. I was working at a mental health facility for the elderly as a nurse, worked there for over a year with a perfect work record. I worked for the same company at another elderly facility, also for the same amount of time with a perfect work record. My coworker found out I have PTSD and decided to tell my boss at the psych facility that I have PTSD, and the two together plotted to have me committed. One day in October 2012, they launched their attack. I was working a 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. shift and doing very well for 2 hours when my boss called me into her office to congratulate me on 1 year service. When we were in her office alone, she started grilling me about my mental health and how it plays out at home. Next thing I know, she's forcing me to call my coworker, who is off duty, and making me go with her to the psych emergency because I have PTSD. The entire meeting was designed to stress me out and caused me to be triggered enough to behave poorly or crazy somehow to rationalize the next step, which was to cart me off to an emergency, and when they see me, they will instantly know I belong locked away in a padded room. They didn't, though. The hospital said I was fine, just stressed out about being forced to go to the hospital like a crazy person for no reason other than admitting I had PTSD. After the hospital let me go, my boss put me on extended medical leave without telling me and ignored all my calls for 2 weeks. wrote letters lying about me to her bosses and the HR department. I filed a union grievance and a complaint with a third-party whistleblower company for my company's head office to hear about. My boss lied about me to everyone. She said I told her I had a murderer in my head, that I was standing in front of mirrors with knives wanting to cut flesh. They believed her, so they shut down my complaints. I took it to the Human Rights Tribunal, self-represented, against the largest long-term care provider in North America, and I fricking won. Took 3 long years from incidents to end of court. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. My employer's health declined considerably by the time the trial happened. She lost her job, she had to move to the mainland, and there is a forever public record about what she did. The co-worker who helped my boss is in the permanent record, and the employees of the job site were ordered to learn what she and our boss had done to me and the outcome. She will never be comfortable at that job site again, and who and what she is known to all. I got the highest amount awarded for damages to dignity and self. I created a precedent for other PTSD persons with a clean work history who do a good job on the clock but have very real struggles with PTSD symptoms at home. No karma could possibly taste better than $40,000 and a clean reputation. What are some double standards that don't involve gender? When I was a little kid, if I left my toys out and one of my parents stepped on one, I got yelled at for leaving my toys all over the place. But if my parents left their tools out and I stepped on one, I got yelled at for not watching where I was stepping. I always find it amusing that when I purchase chemicals for my company, I can order some real crazy stuff, or stuff that can be used to do/make or synthesize crazy stuff, without raising an eyebrow or having to submit documentation or business records, because, hey, we've got an account, so it must be legit. But when I order good old 99.9% pure ethanol, which is really cheap for us because it's tax exempt since we're using it for industrial purposes rather than drinking it for entertainment, there's a mountain of additional paperwork attesting to the above. When I went to Japan, I was heckled by my friends if I went and had American food. Yet, when the same group of friends went out to Japanese guests here in the States, we always only went out to Japanese food. WTF? Seriously, I got American food when I lived in Thailand about once or twice a month, which is nothing compared to the 30-plus days in a month and 3 meals a day, but I would just be judged by the locals and even some foreigners for stepping into a McD for a hash brown and sausage and egg McMuffin. Like, leave me alone, fam. I'm homesick and I don't want to sweat from the burning spice of last night's leftover curry at 8 a.m. when it's already 33 degrees, 91 in freedom units, outside. When I have a lot of experience at a job application, like they asked for, but the employer thinks I'm too old for the job. My parents say that our generation only does stuff so that we can take a picture and post it, and then whenever we go to do something, my parents take a ton of pictures so they can post them. My mother rants and raves about technology a crap ton. She's the epitome of the good old days, yet 90% of her time is Facebooking on her phone. My parents are the same way. They used to be big sticklers for little to no technology, didn't have a gaming system until late middle school, didn't have internet until high school, didn't get my first smartphone until college. But now, my parents are the ones with the most tech, and my dad makes at least 1 to 2 posts to Facebook a day. My brother and I, both in our 20s, have to pry my dad away from his iPad to join us for our family's meals or watch a movie together. My boyfriend's graduation ceremony was this past Saturday, and my dad was responding to emails and Facebook posts throughout the event. It's quite funny when we call him out on it too, because he says, "I'm just answering some emails," or "responding to Facebook posts." So he's entirely self-aware that he's doing it, but in his mind, it's justified. I've always found my parents' tech habits more funny and cute than anything. I can see these people's points though. At least growing up, my parents' technophobia got me out of the house a bit more than I might have got otherwise. Employers who expect you to stay late for hours of overtime on their whim, but get mad if you're even 5 minutes late in the morning. If I'm flexible for them, I think it's fair to be flexible for me. Such a nitpicky thing to destroy morale when it's already so bad from being forced to work late. Luckily, that was my old job, and I'm in a better place now. Bad parenting on their kid versus other people's kids.
But my kid is special.
Oh yes, I'm a twin with incredible parents. My middle school bully was a twin with terrible parents. They were twin sisters and would fight constantly in class. Like embarrassing screaming matches. My twin brother and I always got along, mostly due to his kindness and compassion through my moody and volatile adolescence. I was straight up B-word to him most of the time. However, we obviously fought sometimes. Once we were having a small argument in the hallway. I was accusing him of taking my silly bands to give to his little girlfriend, or some middle school drama thing, and my bully's mother, who was the superintendent of my school, called my parents and told them my brother and I were fighting at school and needed to be controlled. She didn't even approach us first. She could have definitely broken up our little argument by just talking to us. We weren't screaming or even talking very loud. I was just very clearly mad at him. I don't know if she saw the argument herself or if one of her daughters told her we were fighting or something. Meanwhile, her kids interrupted half of class every day and they didn't even get sent to the office. Cities and states telling us to conserve water by watering less. Some people comply and they end up getting fined by their city for having a dead or dying lawn. City and state buildings have the greenest lawns around because they water around the clock. Early morning, high noon, and the evening. Half the sprinklers are usually overspraying in the middle of the road. How about cities and states telling citizens to conserve water, then selling the water rights to major corporations or factory farms for almost nothing? I'll cut down my showers when you stop selling the state's water to gosh darn Nestle. Celebrity overdoses. Oh, such a tragedy. Addiction is a disease. When anybody else overdoses, ugh, gosh darn junkie, what did they expect to happen? Poor and weird equals weirdo. Rich and weird equals eccentric. Also, rich people don't commit crimes, they make mistakes. Unless the controversy becomes so large that it's threatening the reputation of other rich people. Then some of the offenders will be publicly ostracized and will be told that they fixed systematic issues. Bonus points if they make a heartfelt public apology on some talk show and restart their career. Celebrity worship overall just makes me angry. Yeah, when you think about it, there's a lot of people locked away who just sort of had the misfortune to not be rich and famous at the time. Tall people get more opportunities, get promoted easier, and generally make more than average or short people. Tall and pretty? Oh yeah. What about pretty ugly? Definitely true. However, the research on looks and strangers' opinions of you is strong. In fact, I don't even recommend Googling it because it can be depressing to see how something like appearance influences so many people's opinions of individuals they know nothing about. From which politicians people vote for, to who gets hired for executive positions. Different side of the same coin, I can resonate with this so much. Not on a personal level so much, but I have had quite a number of conversations with co-workers who expressed their dislike of another fairly new co-worker. Their reasoning varied, but generally it was, "He just thinks he is so good or better than us." The guy in question was good-looking, young, but more importantly, was into bodybuilding. So he took care of himself and only ate his specified meals. The amount of middle-aged women that said they didn't like him just because they thought he was up himself was amazing. If I'm on my phone, people will almost always leave me alone. If I'm reading, they want to ask me what I'm reading and interrupt me, even though they can see the cover of the book. Which, if I wanted to talk, would I be reading? When I was a kid, I used to be allowed to read a book while around family at family gatherings. But when I got a Game Boy and played with that, I was told off for being unsociable. Except, I'm very dyslexic, and when I read, I am completely unable to hear anything, even someone calling my name. I could play on my Game Boy and hold a conversation at the same time. Adults will always whine about children enjoying the latest technology. I'm generally expected to give 2 weeks' notice if I'm going to be quitting a job. However, if said job wants to get rid of me, they can do it with absolutely no notice, and often with a bullcrap reason. That one depends on the country. In Canada, unless there is just cause, with extensive proof of written warnings, attempts at retraining or proof of a serious incident, the company is legally required to pay a period of notice depending on how long you've been there or your skill level, or allow them to continue working for that long. It's always amazing to me that even the US doesn't have laws like this in place to protect employees. Respect is earned. I deserve respect. Depends on what you mean by respect. I should treat you like another worthy human being? Okay. I should treat you like some sort of authority? F no. Rabbits and any other pet. I had a black mini, Rex, and she was the most intelligent rabbit I've ever had. She was litter-trained, did tricks like standing up, kisses, and came when you called her name only as long as she felt like it. But whenever I'd talk to her about people like they talk about their dog or cat, people look at me like I'm mad. People always ask each other about how their dog or cat is, but start talking about a rabbit and they lose complete interest. When I told them how much I spent on the vets a few times she's been ill, I've had some people say, "Why don't you just get a new one?" Because it's a living thing. Another rabbit we got from a pet store turned out she had some problems, and the manager of the store said, "Why don't you return her and swap her for another one?" How about get lost? She's a living creature that didn't ask to be here. Some people need to understand that there are a lot more to rabbits than meets the eye. Being bilingual, specifically speaking English and another language. In most of the world, I'm considered intelligent and sophisticated if I speak more than one language, even if I speak with an accent. In the States, speaking a second language, especially if I have an accent, gets me disrespected as a stubborn, non-acclimated immigrant. Oof, I feel this one. There's nothing more frustrating than having people speak to you as if you're a child, even though you're an educated, well-read person with a speaking handicap in the current situation. Narrator rant over. If I finish a 9 to 5 and want a glass of wine after work to relax, that's perfectly normal. If I'm working a night shift and want a glass of wine after work to relax, I must have a drinking problem because it's 8 a.m. and I'm opening a bottle of rosé. You're supposed to drink Bloody Mary before 10 a.m. Once the clock has 4 numbers on it, all bets are off. The need to respect your elders even when they abuse that privilege and treat young people disrespectfully. If you want respect, you need to show respect. Sometimes people use respect to mean treating someone like a person, and sometimes they use respect to mean treating someone like an authority. And sometimes people who are used to being treated like an authority say, "If you won't respect me, I won't respect you." And they mean, "If you won't treat me like an authority, I won't treat you like a person." And they think they're being fair, but they aren't. And it's not okay. Pretty good quote. Old enough to join the military and go to war, but not old enough to buy a beer. Laughs in German. Professors will have very strict due dates on students, but will wait until the last week of the semester to finally give back our grades from our first presentation. Or they waste half a frickin' hour trying to figure out how to use the projector. If I have trouble with my laptop or submitting an essay, it's TS. The federal government putting green herb at the same level as crystal, white powder, and smack. Meanwhile, alcohol and tobacco are available in stores everywhere. What's worse is that actually, according to the drug scheduling system, Mary J is set at a higher class than white powder and crystal. Schedule 1 is supposed to be reserved for substances that can cause harm and have no medical usage. White powder is on Schedule 2 because it has a medical use, namely as an anesthetic, and it can help stop bleeding. Crystal is also a Schedule 2 because forms of amphetamine are used in ADHD medication. I don't agree with green herb being Schedule 1 for many reasons, but especially because it doesn't even meet the criteria for it. It's a catch-22. Weed is S1 because it has no medical uses. It has no medical uses because those medical uses can't be researched. It can't be researched because it's S1. Same goes for harm. A lot of this has been changing recently, though. At my old job, there was this lady in her 50s who would say whatever was on her mind, even making fun of the managers or policies during meetings for everyone to hear. Yet I, female 22, say one sassy thing and I need to learn to watch my mouth. Yep, seems fair. This was just a generic retail job and this lady had only worked there for like 5 years versus the 3 years I'd worked there. So I definitely think it was solely her age that let her get away with it. Oldest children never get away with anything, but they see their younger siblings not getting punished for the same things they would have been excoriated for. I'm the youngest of 3, with a massive age gap between me and my 2 siblings. Yet, when my sister was a grade A C-word to me, daily, she's a frickin' psycho, guess who got punished and guess who got absolutely no consequences whatsoever? I'll give you a clue. It wasn't her getting told off. I think we forget it can just as easily go the other way. I feel like the debate on whether older or younger siblings have it tougher is as old as time itself and will go on forever. I know me and my siblings are still having it into our adult years. If a dog doesn't like someone, that person's character is questioned immediately. But if a cat doesn't like someone, the cat's just a butthole. Have had dogs and cats, love them both, so not looking to start a cats versus dogs argument. The thing that bothers me about the whole dogs are good judges of character bit is that I've seen movie footage of the Führer of the Third Reich petting dogs and the dogs liked him just fine. I think dogs have an entirely different value system than humans. A dog might like you or hate you because of something it smells that humans can't detect. I've had some dogs charge at me in attack mode and others walk up to me and beg to be petted. They don't sense innate goodness or badness in people. They just have their own likes and dislikes that have nothing to do with human values. To add to this, I also believe a large bit of a dog's behavior is what it picks up from its owner. For example, the only person my dog has ever been unfriendly to was someone who I had a strong disdain for. Yeah, I'm shifty as heck and dogs love me. Managers berating you for doing a bad job when they have absolutely no idea how to do your job. Should have clarified that I meant more when a manager who has no idea how to do your job picks apart the work you've done, looking for flaws, criticizing your process when there's otherwise nothing wrong with it. When you burn a body in a crematorium, you're doing a good job. But if you burn a body at your house, you're destroying evidence. Same thing as when Miley Cyrus is in the nude and licking a hammer. It's art. But when I do it, I'm drunk and need to leave the hardware store. If the government owes you money, it can send you your refund any gosh darn time it wants to. If you owe the government money, you can bet there will be interest and penalties added.
Actually, if the IRS holds on to your money too long, they will pay you interest. And then the IRS will charge you tax on that interest.
Work smart, not hard, only applies to people who aren't usually smart. People with a good record are assumed or expected to do a better job than their peers with the not-so-great levels of achievement. This would be okay, except for the fact that the person with a good record could be punished for producing the same quality of work as the other person, simply because they're capable of more. I'm all for personal growth and doing your best, but sometimes the job simply doesn't require the extra effort. It's ridiculous to ask me to go above and beyond when I could save my energy for something that actually takes more work and deserves more time. It's okay for old people to be bigoted and close-minded because they grew up in a different time, whereas young people are just considered ignorant a-holes. Which is why I refuse to acknowledge he's just set in his ways as an excuse. No, he's just stubborn and refusing to change. Now, if they have a legitimate memory problem like Alzheimer's or dementia and aren't in their right mind, that's different. They actually cannot help that. As there often are in these chat rooms, there was a recurring theme in this one, that one being generational differences and entitlement. I have filtered it down to a much smaller representation for the sake of variety. Having kids versus not having kids. A good friend and co-student and I are in very similar situations. We both started studying medicine after 8 years of working in the same hospital. He's married, I live with my girlfriend, we both have to take the train for about an hour, 45 minutes for me, 1 hour for him, to get to our university. We both had a lot of problems in our first year, especially with chemistry and biology. I recently asked to have one subject shoved into a later year, so I have more time to study anatomy and other important subjects and refresh my knowledge of chemistry to then be ready for biochemistry, a subject most med students struggle with. I was able to change my entire curriculum the way I wanted, granted, having to study 1 or 2 semesters longer, because I have a 3-year-old kid. They told him that his situation is not severe enough to grant him to study longer than usual, even though it could easily mean he won't be able to fulfill his dream. Charities for kids get funding. Clean water for kids, clothes for kids, food for kids, AirPods for kids, but try to get funding for adults. Kids are seen as innocent, but adults just need to stop being lazy and get a job. Adults sometimes get stuck in impossible situations through no fault of their own. Having a job isn't a guarantee that nothing bad will ever happen to you. We'd have less kids in need if we helped the adults in their families and communities. The other one is substance addicts. Everyone says they should get clean, and they should, but people treat addicts in recovery as bad or worse. No one wants treatment clinics in their neighborhood. It's hard to get a job already, and if you have to go to the clinic every day, people find out that you are in recovery, getting off substances, and they don't want to talk to you. I work with people in recovery, and there's so many hoops to jump through just to get and keep treatment services. I think anyone who wants to get clean deserves support and respect. It's a very tough road. It's fine to say you're trying for a baby, but it's not okay to tell people you cream pie your wife on a daily basis. In my freshman ELA class, our teacher put my best friend and me next to each other. This was a teacher who was very monotone, was never interesting to go to her class. I was trying to be a good student, but one day she yelled at me for a reason so stupid I can't recall. This teacher also really liked my friend. So we decided to see how double-standard she was. She had a strict policy of not putting your head down in class, which is damn near impossible to do. She would randomly tell us to read from our library books when she didn't feel like teaching. With this knowledge, me and my friends decided to put her to the test. Recall, we are right next to each other. We both, in the exact same way, put our heads down on our arms. She walked around the opposite side of the classroom, thinking we wouldn't see. She finally showed up behind us. That's when she tapped on my desk, stood in awkward eye contact and silence and said, "Keep your head up and read," very sternly. After this, she walked away. Within a second or two, my friend and I just died of laughter as she turned around and yelled at us for talking during reading time. This isn't the only time we have done this. Streaking. At what age is it no longer okay to be bare naked or only wearing underwear in public? 1-year-old? 2? Or 3? 17? 85? Not to mention bare naked baby photos. I think the general rule is, if you need someone else's help to wipe your butt, you get a pass. Being old enough to have a job and pay tax, but not being old enough to vote and have a say in where your tax dollars go.
Doctors of Reddit, what's something you've had to tell a patient that you thought for sure was common knowledge? Have had to inform a few male patients that the condom only goes on the shaft and should not be pulled down to include covering of the testicles. How a shorter/fatter 5 milliliter oral syringe held more volume than a skinnier and longer 1 milliliter oral syringe. How does this hold more liquid when it's shorter? Also, I've seen almost every incorrect way to use an inhaler, upside down being fairly common. People taking birth control pills only on the days they have intimacy. I no longer assume anything as common knowledge. I'd rather have someone be offended that I explained something basic than to have something awful happen because I assumed the patient knew something. After putting a few stitches in a middle-aged guy's scalp, the family asked if he was okay. The attending joked that his brain was still inside. The family were stunned by this news. I, the medical student, spent the next half hour informing the family that the brain was inside the skull and that a person couldn't live without one. They thought that the brain was just a turn of phrase to reflect a person's common sense rather than an actual organ. Sort of the same as what they thought about the heart. I'm not a doctor, but I'm an ER nurse. I had a patient come in for an STD check. She was very upset and continued to tell me that she only had one partner. Progressing through my assessment, she further divulged that even if he was sleeping with other people, it shouldn't matter because he uses a condom every time and he makes sure to wash it thoroughly after every use. I asked what she meant when she said he washes it after every use. She explained that he washed the condom with hot water and soap before he used said condom again. I had to explain to her that condoms are a one-time use product. She had no clue. My dad is a family doctor in the States. A woman came in for a well baby check with their 6-month-old and she had what looked like chocolate milk in the baby's bottle, so he started explaining to her as kindly as he could that she shouldn't be giving her baby chocolate milk, at which point she interrupts him and says, "Oh, that isn't chocolate milk, it's coffee. He just loves it." If you're going to put it in your butt, make sure it has a flared base, or is attached to something you won't lose your grip on. Corollary, if you've already lost something in your butt, don't lie to the triage nurse and then medical team. While your story is usually amusing, we don't really care how it ended up in there. Pediatric nurse here. I've told more than one parent that their infant should not be drinking Dr. Pepper out of their bottle, or any other vessel for that matter. Viagra does not prevent STDs or pregnancy. Not a doctor, but a paramedic. During clinical time in the ER, 17-year-old came in with a bloody rectum/anus. Apparently she wasn't wiping after using the bathroom and it was basically really bad diaper rash. So the nurse had to call social services and explain to this girl proper wiping. I'm a veterinary technician. I once had to explain to a client that the ticks she had been frantically trying to remove from her male dog's belly with tweezers were actually his nipples. I also told her she had an extremely well-behaved patient dog. Not a doctor, RN in the ICU. I've seen some really stupid people over the years, but a few weeks ago, a patient's family member got into a verbal altercation with me over the fact that I was trying to freeze his mother to death. He kept pointing to the digital thermostat displaying a temperature of 23 degrees Celsius. We're in the US, by the way. When I gently explained to him that 23 degrees Celsius is not at all cold, he just kept pointing to the display and shouting, "You don't think 23 degrees is cold? It's 23 freaking degrees in here!" and acting insane. After multiple attempts to explain to him what Celsius is by myself, the charge nurse, house supervisor, and security, we finally gave up and had him escorted out. He was a man in at least his late 30s who's graduated high school and had never heard of Celsius and Fahrenheit. He literally thought we were making it up in an attempt to conceal my efforts to freeze his intubated, critically ill mother to death. Slightly graphic warning. Another vet here. Dead bodies decompose. If you leave your dead dog I euthanized in the back of your car on the hottest day of the year, don't come crying to me when its belly fills with putrefying gases and bursts. Demanding I cover the costs of reupholstering your car might be considered a little rude as well. A hospital is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for medical emergencies. So the next time you have a stroke on Friday, come in on Friday and don't wait for the weekend to pass. A child cannot have inherited any genetic traits from someone the mother has previously been with. Only one man is the biological father. My wife and I were trying to get pregnant, and due to possible complications, we were talking to an obstetrician. Towards the end of the visit, he tells us in all seriousness, "Just so you guys know, you have to stop using condoms if you want to get pregnant." We just stare at him a bit and say, obviously? And he just shakes his head and says, "You'd be surprised. There's been a few couples that really didn't realize that." My grandmother was the ignorant one getting in explaining. She was 18 and in labor with her first child. She was the kind of lady to wear pants in the late 40s. The nurse looked her up and down and told her to put on the labor clothes. So she took off her top and bra and got on the bed. The nurse is really confused. "Take off your pants too." "Why? It comes out my belly button, right?" asked Grandma. "No, darling. It comes out the way he came in." ER nurse here had to explain to a 27-year-old female that this bleeding she was having for a week every month was normal and why. She had 2 children, by the way. My mother is a nurse and has been for over 25 years. The only story of hers that makes me sick is the story of a man who could not afford Viagra. So he reasoned his cock gun should do the trick, right? It'd stay in there and keep him ready. So he put the tip of the gun in his urethra and filled himself up. Long story short, don't do that. Don't, for Christ's sake, ever do anything even remotely like that. Podiatrist buddy told me this one. Lady has to have foot amputated and is given waiver forms to sign pre-op. Buddy asks if she needs time to think about it. She's very nonchalant and doesn't seem to care much what they do. He gets suspicious and probes a bit as to why she's not more concerned. She says she gets that they have to operate and it's okay because the foot will grow back. He then has to explain she's not a salamander. Things get a bit more serious. Okay, but like salamanders are cool? Imagine if we could regrow our limbs like salamanders. That'd be sick. Not a doctor, but a nutritionist. I work with a lot of different patients and I have tons of stories about food stupidity. Had a lady have bariatric surgery. Your stomach gets surgically stapled smaller. And her mother kept trying to force her to eat real food the day of the surgery when she was on a liquid diet. She would eat it, puke, rip her stitches out, repeat. We had to ban the mother from seeing her because she would literally blackmail and guilt trip this poor lady into eating a whole pizza, barf it all up because her poor post-surgery stomach couldn't handle it, and end up ripping out stitches and causing enormous pain because her mother was positive that she would die if she was on a liquid diet for a couple days. Another lady I was seeing for clinicals was diabetic, and she would come in every week with stupid high blood sugar levels, 250 to 260-ish. Not knowing why they were so high, she kept a record of everything she ate, and all of her food intake seemed fine. One day, her husband came with her, which was weird, and he ninja slipped me a note while shaking my hand. It read, "Ask her about the Quick Trip slushies. She doesn't believe me that they have sugar in them." So I asked her if she was having any soda, lemonade, tea, ice cream, shakes, or slushies, and she told me, like a light bulb had gone off in her head. "Well, I have been drinking about 3 of the 48-ounce Quick Trip slushies every day for a while now. They're just so good. And they aren't food or drink, they're slushies. So they don't have any sugar in them, and I don't need to record them." It was so hard to convince her that those are so full of sugar it isn't even funny. But seriously, 3 a day on a type 2 diabetic? It was one of the stupidest things I've ever heard in my life. A nursing home called 911 for a patient who was having difficulty breathing. When we arrived, a PA was standing in front of the patient, vigorously fanning the old lady with her hands. She looked at us and said, "I'm giving her some oxygen because we couldn't find a portable O2 tank," and keeps flapping her arms. Remember, this is a physician assistant, probably making $100,000 a year. I informed her that she could stop now, and my partner and I did our best to wait until we were outside to burst out laughing. Going off on a side tangent here, some people don't handle stress well. I volunteer as an emergency first responder, but one of the funniest cases I've seen of was out of uniform in an airport. A larger gentleman who suffered from COPD had taken a 6-hour flight. Upon getting through security, he had collapsed and was having difficulty breathing. The first person on scene to help the guy was a firefighter. I was second on scene, younger and smaller than the firefighter. I'm 6'3" and not skinny. This guy was just huge. So I'm letting him take lead as I run through making sure EMS is on the way, checking this guy's vitals, stabilizing his head and neck, big guy, went from conscious to unconscious quickly and fell straight down, and getting a history from his family. In the meantime, the firefighter's kinda starting to panic a little. He may have been new, or just the fact that he was out of uniform and not expecting it threw him. Either way, as the man regains consciousness and I start running through a quick GCS test, which involves me and the gentleman talking to each other and treating for shock, the firefighter tries to retake the guy's vitals. He fails to find a pulse. Understand at this point I am communicating with the patient. He's not completely lucid, but he is speaking to me and groaning. Having failed to find a pulse, the firefighter assumes this gentleman is in full-on cardiac arrest and begins to attempt to apply an AED to his chest. I say attempt because, along with being large, this gentleman was somewhat hairy. Now, in any first aid course for anyone that involves teaching one to use an AED, one of the first things you cover is that the razor in the kit is there in case you need to shave someone. The firefighter, having failed to realize that talking probably means the patient isn't in cardiac arrest and that he is having trouble getting a pulse because the patient is larger, then fails to shave the guy's chest. This leaves the patient with the 2 contact pads hanging off of his chest hair, but very much not in any way contacting his skin, while I've just started to realize what the firefighter was trying to do. At that point, fortunately, an older woman arrives and identifies herself as a trauma nurse, who are, by the way, just about the best people to have on your side if something like this happens. She tells him to go talk to the family, takes lead, and everything goes smoothly from then until the airport medical folks show up and take over. Unfortunately, I'm having trouble not laughing the whole time at the image of the firefighter staring intently at an AED that can't possibly give him a reading on the condition of the now conscious and lucid patient. TLDR, even people who should know better sometimes lose it under stress. Had a lady measure her baby's temperature by preheating the oven and putting one hand in front of it while the other hand was on the baby's forehead. She told the nurse her baby's fever was about 250 degrees. Lady, you either think you're the Human Torch or you don't understand how conduction works. I had an old lady come in with a massive bleed in her brain. She was pretty much gone. I had to explain to her tearful son that there was nothing we could do. He said that he loved his mama and he'd give anything for her. So he asked us to give her his brain for a brain transplant. I actually was left speechless for a minute and then had to spend another 20 minutes explaining why that was not possible. Mom brought her kids to the ER after they ate all of their Halloween candy because they had tummy aches. They were still eating Reese's peanut butter cups when they were in the exam room. I had to explain to her that they need to cut back on the candy, and she looked at me like I had 3 heads. For almost a month, my friend had random pains. Bruises started showing up randomly. He looked ashen, and what we first thought was him being lazy was actually him not having any energy. Finally, his girlfriend got him to agree to go to the doctor, who sent him to the ER, where it took several doctors to figure out what was wrong, either because none of them had actually seen it in real life, or they didn't think someone could be that stupid. Quote the doctor, "You have scurvy. Eat a freaking orange." Ooh, I've got another one. Inhaler technique. So we're told to always show a patient how to take an inhaler if they are new to them, and that we should check technique every so often. Yeah, you think. How hard can it be? Well, my senior once noticed that a patient was getting repeat prescriptions for an inhaler every week rather than every month. We brought her in to find out why. Oh, it just doesn't seem to work very well. I press it up to 50 times and it doesn't help. We were in shock over this. Salbutamol inhalers taken in excess, we're talking like 10 puffs taken in an asthma attack, can give you a thumping headache, a tremor, and a dry mouth. How is she taking 50 and not noticing? We asked to see the technique. Yeah, turns out she was spraying it onto her chest. Internal face palms were had, and we educated her on how to take it properly. A PhD isn't that kind of doctor. Please don't show me that rash. During paramedic school, my teacher was a PA who told us a story of a lady that came into the clinic he was working at. She said she didn't feel well, nothing but general fatigue and not feeling right. He had the nurse do a standard set of vitals and a blood glucose. Her glucose was extremely high, so he goes in to talk to her. He asked, "Has anyone ever told you that you have diabetes?" She replied, "Yeah, a doctor said that I had that once and I took some medication for a couple weeks and felt better." He then had to explain to her that diabetes doesn't go away after some medication. I had the opposite happen to my wife. She was pregnant and had a thyroid nodule. We were concerned about how removal could affect the pregnancy due to changes in hormone levels and anesthetic during the surgery. We stated this concern quite clearly and in great detail. His response was that he will be operating on the neck and that it was nowhere near the baby. Thanks for answering a question we never had and ignoring ours. He was really pushing for surgery before delivery. We did not see him again. I work in a hospital lab. Quite a few years ago, there was a patient who was on our schedule for a semen analysis from one of our fertility doctors. The between the lines here is the patient was having some fertility problems. Patient presents us with a cup of urine. We explain that we need a semen sample, not a urine one. Confused why his first sample was rejected, he goes back to the private bathroom at the end of the hall. About half an hour later, he comes back with another urine sample, and that's when I literally had to have both a birds and bees talk with a man in his mid-30s and clue him in on the world of self-pleasure. This has actually happened twice now in my 8 years, and I found out about another guy when I was talking to my manager about it. The second time, I had a few thoughts. I could save these guys thousands of dollars by explaining how to have intimacy properly. Somehow, it never came up in the office that the wrong fluid is being used. I had to explain to a frantic mother that non-traumatic vaginal bleeding with abdominal cramps is normal in a 12-year-old. I tried to throw her a hint when I asked when the girl's last menstrual cycle was. She merely replied in hysterics, "She doesn't have menstrual cycles! She's only 12! I'll leave the diagnosis to your imagination. I'm a CNA at a nursing home. We got a new resident in and she had a huge bed sore near her tailbone region that had become infected and abscessed to the point that you probably could have fit a Coke can inside the opening. It had to be cleaned, packed, and have a wound pump attached to it every 12 hours. Turns out before she came to us, her family didn't think she needed any at-home help, so they would go over in the morning, get her up, bathe, dressed, put a Pop-Tart on the table for her, get her in her wheelchair, and go about their day. She was incontinent and would sit in the chair for 12 to 15 hours a day covered in her own urine and feces until they came back, wiped her off, and put her back in her bed for the night. Sitting all day in your own filth, it turns out, leads to bed sores. The day she was admitted to my facility, her family, my administrator, and everyone were all talking in a room. They had introduced us and let her know I'd be taking care of her at night from now on. She whispered to me that she needed to go to the bathroom, and I had to kick out my boss and her family because her son insisted that she can just hold it. She was never able to get over the raging infection in her wound, and it eventually killed her. It was one of those situations where I honestly wish I could have looked them in the face and told them, "You know you're the one that killed your mother, right? You killed her." Just as an update, yes, we tried to turn them in for elder abuse, but she was actually still sound of mind and realized what we were going to do. And so, she recanted her story and said she had never told us anything like that. She didn't want to see her son in jail for what he did to her, so she went to her death telling people things had just gotten out of hand and she was too weak. Paramedic here. Have informed numerous people that pouring Gatorade into the unresponsive diabetic's mouth is not a good idea. What you should do, call an ambulance. If they have a glucagon emergency kit, follow its instructions. Do not put anything in, on, near, or around their face. I've heard the powdered sugar and gums, etc., but if you expect an ambulance within 20 minutes, just lie them on their side and wait. Drink the Gatorade yourself. You deserved it. You just saved their freaking life. My mother who worked as a pediatric nurse. She had a mother whose child was putting on a startling amount of weight. This was bad since the patient's mother was obese and had diabetes, and they wanted to control weight gain for baby. So they went through the feeding schedule. Baby was due for a bottle during the checkup. The mother whips out a bottle during appointment. My mom is startled to see the milk is bright pink. She asks, why is the milk bright pink? The child's mother explains that her kid prefers the milk if it has strawberry quick mixed in and drinks more milk. The mom didn't get the connection between quick and weight gain. TLDR, don't feed your child the betas. It makes them fat from the start. IDOC here. Just today, I had to tell a patient that no, you should not attempt to continue wearing a contact lens that was dropped in the toilet. This is like a worse version of that eyeball licking trend from 2013, which actually turns out was a hoax. In a free medical clinic, I had to tell a mother that she should be brushing her 4-year-old's teeth. The daughter came because her throat hurt. After opening her mouth and using a tongue depressor to see her throat, the daughter squirmed like 4-year-olds are prone to do, and the tongue depressor hit her gums. Pus flowed everywhere, and the child wound up having to be put on penicillin before having every last tooth pulled due to severe infection. You should start brushing your infant's teeth as soon as they start teething, and do a gentle gum massage with the baby toothbrush before that. Use safe-to-swallow toothpaste before the child is 10. Let the child brush their own teeth as soon as they are able for practice, and then have an adult brush them at a 45-degree angle toward the gums in small circles. Children should be supervised brushing their teeth until they're at least 12 or longer if necessary. This occurred in Nicaragua, quite far from any major city, and wasn't reported because the mother did follow-up and kept the appointment for extractions. The thought of brushing her daughter's teeth simply never arose. Before modern toothbrushes were invented, people used bones, porcupine quills, sticks, and chew sticks. The ancient Romans had toothbrushes as well. Yes, you should brush your pet's teeth. Pet toothpaste only, no fluoride. No, I didn't murder the mother. She was provided with 6 months' worth of dental supplies for both of them and thoroughly educated on dental hygiene. Alright, now for the old switcheroo. My ex-mother-in-law was a pediatrician. However, her education was all from the 60s and 70s in Cold War Poland, and she hadn't practiced as a pediatrician for 30 years when our doctor was born. Like a lot of first-time parents, we read all of the books, and the vast consensus at the time was that the only thing babies need is mother's milk. So we set ourselves up for that, and the baby is thriving after a couple of weeks with our doctor telling us everything is fine. Mother-in-law comes to visit, and of course, we're doing everything wrong. We can't hold the baby right, we're being too attentive, we're not being attentive enough, she's too warm, she's too cold. I think you expect a certain amount of that, but then she starts insisting on giving the baby sugared black tea in a bottle. I'm not the smartest guy on the planet, but I'm smart enough to let the wife and her mom settle this between them. Lots of screaming back and forth. Showed her the literature from our doctor about nursing, all the references in the baby books, pulled down a couple of recent research articles, but the crazy old battle axe didn't give up. Finally, I caught her after we foolishly left her alone with the baby for a couple of minutes, trying to force her to take a bottle with tea in it. She yelled at my wife, "In a week, I will go back home and then you can do whatever you want with the baby." In a level voice, I told her, "That's what you don't seem to understand. We can do whatever we want with the baby right now." RN. Not an MD, but here's the story. Patient was a newly diagnosed diabetic who needed to be taught how to inject insulin. So the diabetes educator did the good old routine of taking an orange, drawing up insulin, then injecting it into the orange, then made the patient repeat it. Patient goes home, comes back in a week, and his blood sugar is out of control. They ask him if he's been taking his insulin, and he goes, "Of course." So they decide to ask him to demonstrate how he injects insulin. The patient goes, "Sure, I just need an orange." At this point, I started face-palming hard because I know where this one is heading. But of course, they got him an orange and a vial of insulin with the syringe. So the guy draws up the insulin correctly, takes the syringe, injects it into the orange, and then says, "And then I eat the orange." At this point, I had to walk out because I nearly lost myself right there. I once had a patient with a cancer diagnosis completely depressed about not being able to see their family anymore. I was confused because I had spoken with this individual's spouse and extended family who seemed supportive. There wasn't any indication of family problems. It turns out this individual thought genetic and family history had meant something similar to contagious, leading them to the conclusion that one should stay away from loved ones lest it be spread through the family. That was one clarification I was so happy to give. To those wondering how such a misunderstanding is possible, keep in mind that we ought not to judge. Not everyone has the benefit of a good education, nor is everyone part of a generation and culture that has always had medicine and science in their lives. Other times, language and jargon can be a barrier to understanding. I was not the physician that failed to communicate the issues effectively, but we were all glad that at least his problem could be easily dealt with.
What's the worst case of rich kid syndrome you've ever seen? I once had a mum ask if I could open up the back of our ambulance so her kid could see what was inside, since he wanted to be a firefighter. I'm a medic, not a firefighter. I agree as long as he doesn't touch anything. Of course, the second the door opens, the kid hops in and goes straight for our expensive monitor. I tell him no, that it's dangerous and could break, to which he starts screaming, "I don't care, my mum will buy it." And the mum says, "It's fine, just let him play with it. If it breaks, I'll replace it." I had to physically pick him up and carry him out of the ambulance, since she didn't even try to control him. While this is happening, we get paged out for a call, and this B-word suggests that she could pay double our hourly wage if we stay for a few more minutes so her little crap bag could explore/destroy more of our equipment. Get the flip on out of here with that crap, lady. You're willing to delay an ambulance so you won't have to deal with your precious little Joey's tantrum? Unbefrickin-leavable. Oh, that's a winner right there. Ignore your call, it's probably just a poor person anyway. This is what makes me want to punch strangers. Like, just slap the heck out of that woman about 9 times, and then tell the kid this could happen to anyone. Just shock them into reality. But mostly I'm just a mom that would be so frickin' proud of my kid growing up to work in an ambulance, helping others, and making a real difference. And then there's this witch making light of it like the boxy car with the loud siren and flashy lights is a disposable toy for her kid. My roommate refused to go with his family for spring break since there wasn't a flight with first-class seats and only business class was available. He ended up just taking a connecting flight that did have first class available, while the rest of his family just took business on the direct flight. Wouldn't exactly call it rich kid syndrome, but it took me a while to get used to my girlfriend's lifestyle. I grew up in a very working-class family with both my parents working full-time just for us to stay afloat. Went round to my girlfriend's house and saw a lady making food in the kitchen. "Oh, you must be Mrs. Surname," trying to be really polite and introduce myself to her family. That was actually their maid. Awkward. Luckily, they're all really down to earth and stuff, because turns out her parents were basically homeless and living out of storage space when they were my age. But her parents started up a little business that actually became successful enough to support them, and then just kept growing. Figures. People who come from humble beginnings often turn out to become decent people when, and if, they do get rich. I don't think it's too off the mark to say that most of the potential problems come from generations of wealth and complacence, even just one or two. The dude who relentlessly bullied me in school was also one of the richest people in the city. One day a teacher caught him with his hands around my throat and I was pinned against a wall. We were both taken to the teacher's meeting room where it was explained to me that we should try and get along and that we should apologize to each other. Did I mention his dad also built the flash new cafeteria for the school that year? He was caught on numerous occasions with me in some state of distress, and every time they found ways to make it both our problem. His dad pumped a lot of money into that school. He also flew his friends on private airline to Manchester United games, so nobody stood up for me because they could lose their privileges. My saving grace was a lot of his mates in early years of secondary school turned on him in later years because he was such a butthole. Man, clearly I'm not over it. Attended an international high school in Ho Chi Minh City where a lot of new wave millionaires kids live. The school was ridiculous. A third of the kids were expats, perfectly lovely kids. A third were local Vietnamese kids whose parents were working their butts off to send them to a private school, and the other third were these millionaire kids. They wouldn't ever hesitate to show off their mummy and daddy's wealth. They'd pull up to school in Lamborghinis, Ferraris, etc., and if their Rolls-Royce didn't come on time to pick them up after school, it would be a straight phone call to their other driver to, "Come pick me up right now." There'd be such pricks 24/7 to the non-rich locals, classist butt kids, and constantly just bringing up the most trivial things and complaining about them. I'm literally not exaggerating here when I say this. My maid brought me the wrong LV bag. I told her it was the tan brown one, not the light brown one. Ugh, I can't believe it. Now we have to send her on the jet to Shanghai to get it. They all paid and used family connections to get into Harvard, Stanford, UPenn, etc., and even now constantly complain on Facebook and Instagram about how crap their residence hall food was, so they just hired some freaking personal chef or something. Mind you, these kids were the dumbest bunch I've ever seen. One of them literally was clueless about the most basic facts, but still got into business management. Despised the lot of them. Glad I'm in Europe, far away from most of them. Group of rich school kids in Montana out driving around, drinking. Found 2 combines, large farm tractor thingies, worth about $250,000 each, out in a wheat field. Decided to have a demolition derby. Got caught. In the judge's chambers with the farmer who just wanted the damages reimbursed. The high-end family lawyers asked what the heck they were thinking when they did it. The response, "Well, you can't put a price on a good time." Turns out that was the wrong answer. That farmer should have wanted compensation for all his trouble. My God. Especially if the combines were in the field, like, dude is literally in the middle of harvesting. Can't tell you how many Thanksgiving vacations I helped my grandparents with stuff because everyone was still combining and drying corn until the middle of the night. He was 25 years old when I knew him. His father owned oil fields. He had a credit card that he used for anything and everything, that they paid the balance on every month. He never even kept track of what was charged on it, just bought whatever caught his fancy. He openly and shamelessly admitted that he offered his college professor money to give him a passing grade. One day, he was cranky about something and said, "I wish my parents would just die so I could have their money. Why should I have to wait?" When your children talk like Disney villains or members of the Borgia family, it's time to just throw them out and start from scratch. Back in high school, we were doing one of those icebreakers where we passed a beach ball around, and whoever caught it had to answer the question their thumb landed on. Well, this kid who was proclaimed being rich numerous times before talking about his parents owning a known pizza place and how he drives an expensive sports car caught the ball, and his question was, "If you won $1 million, what would you do with it?" His response was somewhere along the lines of, "$1 million wouldn't make any difference in my life." Thanks a lot, Brad. You ruined the game. Wow, what a frickin' power move, though. A very distant relative of ours, i.e. some weird branch of the family tree, offered her son a bribe of an entire apartment building if he finished his undergraduate accounting degree. I just went, "Oh, what?" So you get an immediate investment after graduating and you can rent out the place for mega dollars. My significant other has a rich aunt and uncle with an only child. When he graduated college, his gift was a complex that brings in enough money that this kid could retire on it. If you ask him, he's self-made though. I don't know about rich, but just spoiled. My cousin insisted on a $15,000 wedding ring and $30,000 wedding. She and the groom made about $20,000 to $25,000 a year combined. Her dad paid for everything. They divorced within 6 months. She wanted a wedding, not a marriage. I have a kid in my MBA cohort that outsources his homework and projects to India. He whined and moaned when one of our professors gave him a C when he only showed up to 2 classes after he, Dad, donated $10,000 to the school. Overall, nice guy, but doesn't really have a clue. Outsources his homework and projects to India? He's just practicing for when he goes into the corporate world. I'm trying to figure out how he passes in-class tests. Maybe the $10K donation went to the overworked and underpaid PhD student grading the exams. A kid who would dramatically throw down his smartphone on the ground in mock frustration. Broken phones were replaced with few to no questions. For the record, his name ended with the third. I went to middle/elementary school, but with some very wealthy people. Typically, I was oblivious enough to not really realize it, but 2 instances come to mind. In 5th grade, we did an exchange trip type of thing with some kids in Canada. On the flight over there, one of my classmates said, "Wow, this is crazy. I've only ever flown first class before." Later, in 8th grade, I was at that same kid's house, an absolute mansion on top of a hill, with the long landscaped entrance drive, marble-floored entrance hall with stairs winding up either side, etc., and he and a girl, who had been dropped off in her dad's newer Ferrari, started having a discussion comparing the merits of their relative in-home movie theaters. Like not just a living room with a cool AV setup, but full-on movie theaters with rows of seats that could seat about 50 people. My family wasn't poor, but that was when I realized we weren't rich either. I deliver pizza in a very rich area. I'm talking seeing Rolls-Royces and supercars on a daily basis kind of rich. My manager told me a story of someone that used to work there. This guy would deliver pizzas in a brand new BMW M3 and just put absolutely no effort into his job. Delivering pizza isn't hard. Apparently, this guy only had a job because his parents wouldn't pay his allowance if he didn't work. How much was his allowance? $5,000 a month. This guy was making $60,000 a year to deliver pizza part-time.
That's actually super common with wealthy families. An acquaintance of mine has the same deal with his parents. Work 40 hours a week and get paid $100,000 a year in allowance, plus the $15,000 a month mortgage paid for. I should point out, this is a New York City financial district apartment. $15,000 a month is for a good-sized 2-bedroom condo. Normally when I spit my drink all over the screen when writing these scripts, it's because I'm laughing. This time, it was out of sheer incredulity. Brought my college roommate to my mum's house for Thanksgiving because he lived in a different state and I only lived 15 minutes from campus. I gave him a quick tour of the house and he was astonished by how clean it all was. My mum's a neat freak and keeps a very clean house. Then he said to my mum, "Wow, you guys must have a really good maid service." I've never seen my mum laugh that hard before. 2 girls, both nice and fairly level-headed, but also just raised too darn rich. One would take a taxi everywhere in town. It was a very safe, small college town with free campus buses, and she had taxi across campus. She lived 2 blocks away from me and would take a taxi from her dorm to my house. Google Maps says it's a full 4-minute walk. She swore she just had a terrible sense of direction and couldn't figure out where we lived. But you'd think after the first embarrassingly short taxi ride, she'd throw our address into Google Maps and just walk. The other would regularly complain about people not knowing how to manage their money. It took a while to figure out, but eventually it clicked that she meant very poor people didn't know how to invest their money in stocks and bonds. Then one day, we were having a conversation where she revealed she didn't think a house in Detroit in 2010 could possibly cost under $1 million. I told her I grew up in a nice $180,000 house, and she thought I was dumb or lying. Shattered her world when I showed her my home on Zillow. When she graduated college, she complained about how much stuff costs all the time. It was nice seeing her learn the value of $1, finally. Her parents stopped paying her way after she got a job. She was probably making $70,000 to $80,000 in her first job, but she was living in Pasadena too. She talked all the time about how poor she was and about how she was living in an apartment above a garage. But at the same time, I lived in an apartment with 5 other people and felt pretty wealthy making $11 an hour, so I wasn't exactly heartbroken for her. Mother fricker, I'd chop off a limb to be making $80K a year. Kid in my high school crashed 6 cars within a year. And they weren't like 1990s Toyotas and Hondas most high schoolers buy, themselves. These were brand new Subaru STIs, a BRZ, a BMW, brand new Jeep, stuff like that. The last car his dad bought him was a semi-new Ford Focus, a decent car, better than my 1997 white Camry. Every day he complained and threw a fit his dad wouldn't buy him another $30,000 car. Sounds like his dad needs to buy him a driving tutor. Buying people is usually frowned upon. I work with a guy like the people in these stories. He recently proposed to a girl he dated for a few weeks with a $5,000 ring. He's 19 and we make less than $30,000 a year.
They're married a month later. The girl always looks miserable and the guy is always skirting responsibilities at work. I'd say I only give it a few more weeks, but she might try to milk him for his daddy's money for a little longer. One of the kids in my grade brought bags of cocaine to senior prom. Not only did his parents let him go, but the police did too. Now I believe he's in an engineering program at Yale. Good luck with that, money won't save you from thermals and fluids. A kid that used to work for me came into work super teed off one day. I asked him what was wrong, to which he replied, "My freaking maid didn't make my bed again, but my dad still won't fire her." This was all my college roommates. They couldn't do laundry, pick up after themselves, clean dishes, or make themselves a frickin' sandwich. The ones whose parents lived close by, their mommies would come by and clean up and do their laundry. Came back from a music festival in Southeast Asia, got VIP tickets. I swear this isn't about me. One of the other festival goers is a 20-something-year-old Asian girl who looks like she is straight out of the movie Crazy Rich Asians. This chick had a photographer following her around, snapping pics of her posing in front of the stage with various acts, getting in the way of other people trying to dance. She asked security if she could get them to clear a section for her to get an unobstructed view of the stage for better photos. She bought a couple of bottles, 6, for her table, and again had the photographer take an incredible number of photos of her posing with her bottles of Martell and Jameson. She was incredibly rude to the waitstaff, snapping her fingers and in general talking to them like they were lower-class citizens. She asked my mate and I, both Westerners, to hang with her and her mates at her table, and again have the photographers take photos of her posing with us at the table. The other 2 guys from our group, both Asian, approached us when they saw that we were at the table and it looked like we had made some friends. When they approached us, the girl and her friends got quiet, spoke amongst themselves in Indonesian, and basically shooed them away. We left them after they did that and walked over to our friends. One of the guys is Indo and he told us that she basically told them to get lost and know your place. Friend in college literally went to the local GameStop at midnight every Tuesday. He'd buy every new release for every console. We went over to his house one time that year and he had about 60-ish games that were unopened. One time, we were walking around campus and he stopped by the ATM. He got his receipt and called his dad. Turns out his dad was worried his funds were running low, so he sent him $25K just to make sure he wasn't going to starve. I like to imagine that this guy went bankrupt trying to buy every new Steam release. Considering that some of the simulator games I've seen have more than tens of thousands of euros worth of DLC, looking at you train and flight simulators, that would be kind of amazing. I used to work for a family that had a cleaning lady come every other day. None of the kids made their own bed, had to make their own food, or wash their own dishes. Heck, never even loaded a dish into the dishwasher. They just left them on the table for someone else to pick up. Have never done their own laundry. When the son had football practice, I watched a teenaged boy have a gosh darn meltdown sobbing and cursing about their maid not throwing his uniform into the wash, and he didn't know how to do it himself. The 2 oldest are about to have a very interesting freshman year in college. Bonus story, when I was in college, I roomed with a girl who lived like this. Her mum did everything for her to the point where she couldn't function like a normal adult. Like her mum would drive 11 hours to clean this woman's room for her, clean up her used condom wrappers, etc. Her mum would get really snarky with me, like self-reliance was a loser quality, also because it made her daughter look bad. While it's really easy to learn to wash your own clothes, etc., she couldn't do it and just said, "Oh, well, I won't have to. When I graduate, I'm going to get a high-paying job and have everything done for me. I wasn't raised to be domestic like you." Fun fact, I wasn't raised that way. I did my own cooking and laundry because my mum couldn't be bothered to do anything but watch soap operas and Lifetime movies. Fast forward to the present day, guess who couldn't hack taking care of herself after college and had to move back in with her mum? I played football in a local kids league. One kid from another team was basically untouchable as his dad was a major sponsor of the league and would donate money for uniforms, drinks, etc. His son was a pretty good receiver but didn't like getting hit, and his parents made a big deal of leaving their son alone so he can develop his skills. He was insufferable. Anytime he scored a TD, he would do over-the-top celebrations and mock all the other players, his teammates included. Then came high school. Most of the kids in the league ended up in one of 2 schools. He went to mine. During tryouts, he did well. The coaches were mostly focused on skills and minimal contact during the first round of cuts. The final round was when things got interesting. Full contact was permitted, and he got rocked over and over again. No one was actually trying to tackle any harder than normal, it's just this dude didn't know what to do when he got tackled. So he screamed and cried a lot. He didn't make the team, until his dad came down to the school and offered to donate money for uniforms and some other goodies for our sports teams. So he made the team, and again we were told to take it easy on him a bit. So he did, but the other teams didn't, and he went up against some of the players he mocked previously, and they remembered. Our quarterback kept passing to him, and he was getting repeatedly smashed, over and over again. It was the only time our team cheered for the other team. He quit playing football after that. I can't help but feel bad for Football McChad III. Having your own team root against you and not understanding why everything your dad bought the team didn't help. I wonder if he became more isolated after that. Had a friend in high school whose dad was uninvolved. He was raised middle class like myself and lived with his mum and stepdad. After high school, he worked towards becoming an electrician and was saving for his first apartment. His dad eventually came around when he was right out of high school and started giving him money here and there when he needed it. His dad owned a large company on the East Coast and was a multi-millionaire. Soon his dad convinced him to quit trade work and gave him a job at his business. Shortly after, he was promoted to a managerial position he wasn't qualified for and paid way too much. He'd get drunk while on conference calls and nobody questioned him since he was the boss's son. His dad bought him his first home, almost $500,000, and multiple cars. He took up horse racing and, quickly, we had nothing in common. Gone were the days of dumb teenage stuff, going fishing, hiking, and video games together. He quickly found a girlfriend whose dad was a multi-millionaire. She was 30 and still putting everything on daddy's credit card. I couldn't keep up with their lifestyle and very quickly we faded as friends. After his girlfriend and him broke up, she told me that he was actually severely depressed and almost drove his car off a bridge multiple times. Deep down, he was having issues with wanting to live up to his dad's lifestyle and standards, but losing his old friends and life. It's too bad. I haven't seen him in probably 4 years now. We tried to reconnect a few times, but it just doesn't work anymore. That's really sad. It's like his dad wanted to make up for the neglect with money. A friend of my brother is also very well off. His parents offered him a $175,000 a year job in their family business to basically do nothing. He already lived rent-free in a waterfront apartment, car, credit card, etc. He spent his days doing drugs and partying. He's clean and sober now, but yes, it took years and years of rehab. And even now they offer him too much. He got married and they wanted to make it crazy ostentatious. It was already pretty glam, and he knows to reject it.
What disgusting secrets does your employer keep from its customers? The fajitas sizzle because we pour oil and water on a hot plate, not because we grilled anything. My whole life is a lie. Former employer was charging clients for a WAN backup solution that wasn't even running. I was still actively developing it when I quit. Client called up and asked to see the records of the backup. I said it wasn't running and that we didn't have any to my knowledge. Client flips out, calls boss flips out at me for not lying. Screw that noise. I used to work in a major movie theater and we would recycle hot dogs. Basically, if the links were on the spinning rack all day and didn't get purchased, they would be thrown in a bucket and refrozen. We poked a fork hole in one to see how long it would stay in rotation. 7 freaking days. Worked for a self-storage place in Rocklin, California. They made every customer sign a lease agreement that said that you wouldn't hold them responsible if your unit was broken into and things were stolen. I found out that we had 7 to 8 burglaries a year. The owners would get sued, but they would always get off because they produced the lease agreement in court and the judge would dismiss the case. One day, I came in from vacation to pick up my paycheck, and I found the owner and the manager loading up a truck with the contents from a unit that wasn't theirs. I went around the corner to an area where the fence allowed me to look in, and saw that they went to another storage space, cut off the lock, and proceeded to load up the truck with a telescope, big screen TV, and some power tools. I came back the next day and asked one of my coworkers. He told me that the owners of the storage space would sell the stuff they stole from renters, and that the manager and the owner did the same thing with another property that they owned in Granite Bay. I quit to go back to Sac State. I called the Rocklin cops to tell them what the owners were doing, and they said that there was nothing they could do unless they were caught in the act. Tim Hortons Smile Cookies. Pay an extra $1 for a chocolate chunk cookie with a smile drawn on it. All proceeds go to local charity. Unfortunately, store owner would just go into the system, void all cookie sales, and replace them with regular chocolate chunk cookie sales. A small business owner for whom I worked several years ago kept deducting the employees' health insurance premiums but never sent the payments in to the carrier. After 2 to 3 months of this, our insurance was canceled right before one lady's teenage son was in a fairly serious car accident. She finds out at the emergency room, during what is of course an extremely stressful time, that she has no insurance whatsoever when she and her dependents have been fully covered. The next day, she went into his office, very upset, to find out what happened. He gave his usual song and dance and made excuses for not having been able to send it in, and this normally mild-mannered lady picked up a stapler and threw it at him. He wasn't even injured. While doing that was, of course, unacceptable, I totally understood her frustration with this weasel. He spent thousands of dollars a month of company money, coding it to company expenses, at Sam's Club on groceries and big-ticket items for his house, on top of his already generous salary. Then, to top it off, he actually took her to court for the stapler-throwing incident. After hearing the story, the judge dismissed the weasel's case and made a comment to the effect that if he were in the same position as her, he probably would have done the same thing. Used to sell cars at a major dealership. The unofficial sales contest was to see how much over MSRP they could sell the car for by confusing the customer on the price with payments and financing, manipulation of trade value, and sometimes outright fraud, like promising manufacturer rebates then not applying them. The winner, quote-unquote, for the 2 months I was there was over by $10,000, selling a car that should have been about $20,000 for over $30,000. The sad part is, the customer might never even know because they still got the payment they wanted. Please do yourself a favor and don't shop solely based on payments, and if you are financing, then make sure you are aware what the final selling price of the car is. There is a major difference between $400 a month at 60 months at 0% interest and $400 per month at 84 months at 0.9%. I used to work at Frisch's as a hostess, busser, drive-thru attendant. That place was filthy and corrupt as heck. No one in the kitchen wore gloves, and the cooks loved making people eat old food or food that had been dropped on the disgusting floors. The manager loved to steal the waitress's tips and blame the customers or the sketchy-looking bussers. The most corrupt thing the awful manager did while I was there was around Christmas time. He would take $100 out of each of the new/younger employees' cash drawer, call your parents saying that their kids stole the money and they needed to be brought in to be questioned. When I went to work the next day, I found out the same crap happened to a few of the others. We all got angry and snagged the key that locked the box to the camera controls, rewinded to the following day, and watched until we saw the jerk start doing his thing. Every single one of us reported him. He got insta-fired. It was glorious. TLDR, Frisch's is gross and my old manager was a corrupt jerk. I worked for a vet in Vancouver and I ran a whole month of raffles, nail cuttings for donations, and pet pics with Santa for the SPCA. When we added up the last of the money from the month, I put it in the safe. The practice owner's wife deposited the money and bought herself some new Chanel makeup. What the frick? I quit in disgust. We have a roach problem, and gnats are everywhere. Customers can see the gnats flying around the salads, fruits, and pies we have out, but I guess it doesn't disgust them enough to not come back. More than a few times, customers have complained about bugs in their drinks that ended up there after they died in our ice machine. The worst was a live cockroach in someone's salad that was on the fork as they went to take a bite. Whole cooked turkey breasts and roast beefs have been dropped on the floor and served without any of the managers and employees giving two craps. I've realized most restaurants are so much more dirty than shown, but I've eaten out my whole life. I guess my consolation is that I'm probably building up some immunities to all the ickies out there. I used to work for a local children's charity where a good majority of the money was skimmed to pay for the owner's for-profit business. I worked for a popular national pet store chain. We told our customers that we got our puppies from, quote, reputable breeders and not puppy mills. We got them from puppy mills, and I can't express how many came in on the back of a large, pitch-dark freight truck, malnourished, scared, and sick. We also adopted the cute kittens from the local shelters and charged customers outrageous amounts of money, most of whom just felt bad for the kittens. Don't support national chain pet stores that sell puppies that do not come from local shelters, folks. If you want a dog or a cat, then please adopt. Or find a stray, take it to a vet and adopt him or her. Also, donate whatever you can to local shelters. Food, toys, beds, money, etc. They could really use it. I just want to say that if you have ever worked at a water park, it will turn you off of visiting any kind of public pool or park for the rest of your life. The things we pulled out of those filters, man. No. Just pour so many chemicals into the water that literally nothing can live in it and call it a day. Macy's doesn't donate anything to charities. They practically force their employees to and claim it as company donation. I worked at Dairy Queen. The collection box supporting children with cancer hanging out in the drive-thru window was a discontinued charity. My manager pocketed all the donations. Disgusting in a different sense. Back when I was a warehouse manager for a major office supply chain, one of my duties every month was to gather items from our inventory that were selected by corporate to be donated to local charities. All items would be collected, scanned, placed on pallets, and loaded onto the trucks to be delivered to the charity distribution center. After a few months, I started to notice that some of the donation items that should have been shipped out mysteriously ended up missing or being used in my general manager's office. I later discovered that on the days that the donation items were collected, my manager would send me out for lunch and revert the scans on whatever donation item he desired in order to keep it for himself. I eventually caught him in the act as I returned early from lunch, and needless to say, he was not able to come up with a good excuse. Instead, he insisted that I take my pick of whatever I wanted from the pallet. I was so disgusted that I immediately put in my 2 weeks notice during the busiest time of the year and filed a complaint with corporate. My last job, we held events and refilled premium liquor with house crap. And during events, charged consumption tabs with 100 plus people, extra shots and bottles that were never ordered so the event holder can pay for something never even used at the end of the night. And that's just scratching the surface. My boss refuses to hire anybody but white women, and he uses rubbing alcohol to wipe the expiration date off of product if it expires. He just puts it back on the shelf, including dairy product. I hate him. For reference, this was 9 years ago, so hopefully he's been fired at this point. This happened years ago, but I was a receptionist for a chiropractor for about 6 months. One day, our first appointment came in. I went in the back to look for him. I walked in on him screwing a coworker on the table, the same table the patients sometimes would lay face down on. I went back to the front and said, "He'll be with you in a couple minutes." God, I was disgusted. He was married with 2 young kids. I didn't work there long after that. Worked store security. There are peepholes above the ladies' changing rooms at several major retailers. Supposed to be for female security agents to monitor the dressing rooms, but we had no female security agents. Lots of creepy voyeurism / self-pleasure going on. Private company I no longer work for. The company list of vehicles included 2 4-wheelers, a Corvette, a Hummer II, a brand new Jeep, and oh right, a 20-foot fishing boat. Also frequently bought company furniture which he would then sell to himself. Government contractor and a weasel. Okay, this really took off and I'd like to clarify a few things. If you have a small business and your cars are company cars and your office is in your home, power to you. Starting a business takes a lot of work. The main problem that I had with this guy was his general selfish nature and lack of respect for anyone. I can't go into details, but there were 2 big projects going on at the company at the same time. One under the government was defense-based, the other which was an invention that he held the patents for was aerospace. He used every trick in the book to siphon the government contract money into the private project so that he could reap the benefits, generally treated employees like dirt, and was just such an unbelievable jerk. I recently worked for another government contractor and my boss there was nothing less than stellar. Using a throwaway. The company I worked for had to maintain a trust account where money owed to clients was kept and then they were paid out of it. There was a small lag of about 30 days between when the money came in and when it was sent to the client. This was a highly regulated industry. For more than 3 years, the company hadn't been paying their clients and had been fudging the books. I found this out when I was told to stop sending reports that showed clients were owed money. I pressed management and found out they had been lying to clients for well over 3 years. And one client was owed $1 million. I should also point out that in this particular industry, this client was in the top 3 in the nation. We're talking about thousands of companies owing tens of millions of dollars. I was instructed to lie to the clients until they were so fed up they threatened to sue the owners, then they would get paid. This was common knowledge in the business. It was openly discussed with customer service. Until I filed a formal complaint with the regulatory agency, none of the more than 100 employees had ever reported them. Not one. And I know why too. After I gave proof to the regulatory agency and quit, they swooped in and seized the company books. And all of my allegations were true. Instead of filing criminal charges against the executives involved, the regulatory agency just fined them and then made them pay back the missing money to the trust. No one was charged with the crime, no one lost their job, no one was put on probation. Absolutely nothing happened to those responsible, and the only consequence is that they have to have regular audits. Screw the government. I worked for a gelato shop that made us dig through the so-called recycling bins to fish out used plastic cups and spoons to wash and give to new customers. Even if the spoons had bite marks from other customers and were coated in chewing gum, we were told to wash them up and only had to throw them out if they were really unpresentable, because these things are expensive. Furthermore, all the other stuff in the recycling bin that people so good-heartedly placed there, yeah, all of it got thrown in the dumpster. Customers ate it up and told us regularly how glad they were that we were a green business who cares about the environment enough to recycle. It didn't take long before I just couldn't keep doing this with a clean conscience, and I turned them into the health inspectors, who were obviously horrified that this was happening. About 2 months later, I got laid off and the business closed its filthy doors forever. They leave sites like Reddit unblocked just to see who is slacking and fire them. One of the few benefits of performance-based jobs is that as long as you're getting your crap done, you can throw that right back into their faces. A few years ago, was working as a call center drone, and the boss of my boss sent me an email regarding the amount of non-work-related internet usage from my computer. I just sent him a metric spreadsheet showing that I was, by far, his most productive employee. Didn't even write anything in the email. Never heard anything else about it. I worked as a supervisor at a water park, and just before inspection by the owner, the director had me go around the park and paint all the rusted metal silver to look like new. Some of those bolts were nearly rusted through and were crucial to the ride's construction. Valet here. I've seen a number of occasions in which rubbing compound was used to cover up mild to moderate scratches. Coworkers have stolen things out of cars, from spare change to a handgun on one occasion. If valet is an option, don't do it. Just want to add, I've never stolen anything out of someone's car. Also, yes, all valet companies are different, just like not all restaurants spit in your food. I valeted my car one time. I thought, nah, they won't steal my stuff. Wrong. They stole lots of stuff. I used to work at Victoria's Secret. We are required to refund and take back any used underwear as well as everything else in the store. It would then immediately go back on the sales racks even if it had obviously been worn. I showed my manager a used pair of pink panties that had a disgusting smell that resembled tuna, and she advised me to just spray perfume on it. I didn't quit immediately because I needed the money. Instead, I would grab a pair of scissors from the back and accidentally cut the ones that I knew had been used, so they had to damage them out and not sell them. I work in designer clothing retail. The clothes are quite expensive, and the assistants are required to only wear full-price garments. So we, the whole team, just pick clothes off the rack, wear them all day, including lunch and bathroom breaks, and at the end of the shift, replace the tags and put the clothes back on the shelf for the customers to buy at full price. I know I was grossed out my first day there. If you come into Geek Squad with a computer under warranty, we are required to at least perform a $70 diagnostic on the computer before sending it out for repairs. If viruses are detected, that price goes up to $190 for the removal. I have had to remove viruses from a client's laptop and then send the laptop off to get the hard drive replaced. Also, $30 RAM installations are per stick of RAM. Seriously. One time our department was doing poorly in sales, so they brought in a specialist to give us an after-hours training session. He opened up with, if anyone is stupid enough to walk through those doors looking for a repair, they deserve to be charged $189 for it. I hated that place. In the store I work at, the warehouse is a complete fire hazard. The electrical boxes are screwed, and things get thrown on them all the time. In the way it's set up, if there was a fire, we'd be boned. There's wood by all the ceiling sprinklers, which would absorb most of the water, and pretty much all our fire extinguishers are several years past expiration. I'm highly considering calling a fire marshal. We can see you. I look after instant photo booths remotely. I see all your stupid faces, all of them, every day. I changed the name of a sushi roll from the Ultimate Roll to the Miami Heat Roll and raised the price to $17. Instantly became the best seller. That's not disgusting. That's marketing. Kudos. And this happens all the time. It's genius, not horrible. Take a look at what bars do. They'll have a special drink in which they have taken another drink and renamed it for double the price. After graduation, one of my roommates from undergrad went on to the University of Texas at Austin to do a master's degree in advertising. At first, he was super excited because the program there at UT was the best of its kind in the country, and he really liked Austin. However, by the end of it, he had totally changed his outlook on advertising and actually ended up going into a different industry. Apparently, his last semester there, the students in his program had to do an internship with a real company and help them come up with an advertising campaign. One of his friends at the program was really excited because he had gotten his internship with Jack Daniels. However, the view on advertising was completely shattered when his bosses at Jack Daniels literally told the guy to go to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings and figure out what they would have to do to get those people drinking again. I once worked for a small retirement home that was owned by a church. I was the night watchman, and during the night, I could smell the odor of feces wafting down the halls. Everyone could. And the nurses at the nurse stations would typically wait until their mandatory rounds times to deal with it. So they basically let residents lay in their fecal matter. I'd say about 10% of nurses actually give a dang about the residents. All the other ones are just there to get paid. I will never go into a nursing home. Okay, as somebody who's worked in elder care for a while, let me explain. There is no such thing as truly great elder care in a retirement home. Unless you pay a crapload of money or go into a 24-hour facility in Thailand or the like, because there you get one-on-one care. There's decent care, where the patient's basic needs are met and they're cared for the best that the understaffed nurses can manage. And then there's awful care, where the old people are lucky if they get their diaper and urine bottles changed more than once a day. It's not possible to give people with dementia or impaired bodies all the time that is necessary when you're understaffed and underpaid and are barely able to rush through the important stuff that needs to be done. You've got women and men crapping themselves at least 3 times a day, and if you're really unlucky, it's the same person every time, and you run out of clothes for them to wear and stick them in a nightshirt, and that is, of course, the first day in 3 months that the relatives decide to visit and get angry because why is their mother, father, or uncle in bed before tea time? Which is all fine. It happens. You deal with it and move on. But every time you need to change somebody or clean somebody or help somebody to the toilet, it throws you back between 10 minutes and half an hour, and that's time that some other patient would have needed. And what you can't finish isn't picked up by your colleagues because they're equally behind. Because you're 5 people for 35 patients and they all need at least 3 hours of your time, which is 2.5 more hours than you can give them. If you're lucky, you gave everybody the right pills and the right food and the right kind of diaper so that they won't get open sores on their butt. And if you miss something ultra necessary, you better hope the next shift catches it. Because if not, it's you on the line, and the excuse Mrs. X pooped her pants and put her hands down her underwear and smeared it on the wall of the hallway and I had to do damage control is not going to fly with anybody. And let's not even get started on what happens when a medical emergency happens, because instead of running to the MRSA infected patient who's been in hospital 3 times in the last 2 months and has been dying for even longer, you walk slower and are relieved when they're dead, because now they won't have to slowly wither away in pain. I worked overnight dairy at Walmart for a few years after I moved, had 7 years total with the company, and hated every minute of it. So in the dairy, we often get returns, stuff that has been left out in the store, and it's our job to put it back up. No thought is given to how long these things have been left out. They're put into a cart and wheeled into the cooler. It doesn't matter if it's a gallon of milk that has been sitting out 5 minutes or 5 hours. It goes back into the cooler and probably back on the shelf. This is done in the name of expediency, which is what drives every policy at Walmart. Things don't get done right, they get done fast. So with milk, if a dairy employee finds it outside the cooler, it probably goes on a return pallet, because we know better than to put room temperature milk back in the cooler, and the store gets a refund on milk we send back to the milk company. Not so with regular employees, who, as they are trained, put it in a basket, wheel it into a cooler, and hand it off to the next guy, who probably is getting crap from his manager to get this stuff back on the shelf. Eggs? Eggs come in with general freight. They don't do returns on eggs. Once again, if a dairy employee picks them up, they probably get ditched in the giant bin of milk, eggs, flour that sits outside the cooler and ferments and smells terrible, but at least it's a good 5 feet from the candy bins, so it's not like any cross-contamination is possible, and never see the shelf. However, same thing as the milk. It could be sitting out for a week. It'll get put on a cart and wheeled back to a cooler, and someone will yell at someone else until it gets put back on the shelf, because nobody likes getting yelled at. While working there, I came down with food poisoning on at least 3 occasions, none of which I was allowed to go home. I walked out on the 3rd after I puked in a mop bucket, told my manager about it, and then found out that mop water, which was probably a day old in the first place, was used to mop the cooler because nobody ever told the employee on duty to change the water. This is ignoring their terrible policies regarding how they treat employees and train management. Don't buy food at Walmart because it might be cheap, but you're getting what you pay for.
Parents, at what point did you realize you raised a monster? Hello, this is the story of my son Felix. I am from Sweden, so I am sorry if my English is bad. Felix is 6 years old and Julia is 4 years old in this story. I can start with an incident that made me wonder how I raised my son. So me, Felix, and his younger sister Julia were on a camping trip through the north of Sweden when my son, from nowhere, just starts to scream, "I will kill you, Julia!" And after he starts to pray to God. No one in my family is religious, and that is what makes me uncomfortable. I ask him, "Felix, what's going on?" And he answers, "Julia wouldn't let me play with her hair." The whole trip I would always check out what Felix was doing because I could just feel his anger of something. I couldn't put my finger on what until 5 years later, 2017, when the same thing happened again. Me and my wife had just picked up the kids from school and let them play upstairs while we're cooking food, and then from nowhere we hear the loudest scream saying, "I will kill you, Julia!" So I ran upstairs as fast as I could. When I came up to my room the kids were playing in, I saw my daughter laying on the floor bleeding from her hair, and beside her, my son is sitting praying to God with blood on his hands. We're so confused, my son had pulled so hard in his sibling's hair that she had lost hair and started bleeding. That is the most creepy thing I've seen in my life so far. When I ask my son what he has done, he answers me with the most chilling voice I will ever hear. "Julia wouldn't let me play with her hair, Dad." About 2 weeks after the incident, I asked Felix why he pulled her hair. He said, "The man in my head tells me what to do. I can't choose what to do." My son is getting help and my daughter is fine. I had to buy security cameras because he was stealing, throwing parties, doing illicit substances in my home, etc. He looked right in the camera and flipped me off while I was at work. My heart fell. I'll ask my 18-month-old if she poo-pooed and she'll smile and say, "Yeah." Then when I put her on the changing table and take off her diaper, no poop. This makes me laugh because the kid isn't a monster, but they've found a surefire way to get attention anytime they want it, and you can be sure they're going to use it. Not my kid, but my partner's adult sister is a real handful. A panoply of vaguely diagnosed mental illnesses, including bipolar and psychosis. She's on income assistance, which helps. But she goes from morbidly depressed in the winter to wildly high in the summer. We let her move in to get herself out of debt, which she did, but now she's back in another hole. She picks bad boyfriends, the last of which we had to get a restraining order against after he threatened our children when we extricated her from his abusive grasp. The worst part is that the cycle is never ending. It's been this roller coaster for 20 years, and we're really, really tired. She's 14 for life, and not the good kind of 14-year-old. Big sister here. My brothers were fighting yesterday in the room beside mine. I'm hearing everything for 20 minutes straight. I'm having a cold and therefore wanted to see if they could resolve it first. The older brother is constantly using his strength, he's strong, fat, and tall, to taunt the younger one, but the older one is a wimp who will sit down if you demand respect. The younger one is even more of a derogative word for a female reproductive organ. I don't really condone using this word, but seriously, that is what he is. This younger is the middle child. They still don't break it up after 20 minutes. I go in there, throw the older one out of the room. He gets out, not before he hits him again. I had surgery on my leg a while ago and still in recovery, so really in no shape to get between them unless I want my other leg to break. The older gets out of the room, then suddenly the middle one gets the courage to beat him up when he's out of the room. I do not touch him but block his exit with both hands to the side of the door. This little psychopath uses all his strength to push on my hands, and I almost fall to the floor. He knows all the pain I've been in from my surgery. I get mad and tell him to stop acting like this, and if he really had the courage and wanted to beat the older one up, he should have done it in the 20 minutes before and maybe earlier. He starts taking his anger out on me, and I've had enough. My headache is so bad at this moment, I close the door and lock with a key by force. He gets out the window and gets in the house via the balcony. Now this is where his horrible and outright scary personality comes to show. Keep in mind he's only 13. I tell him, what is he doing? What does he want? He talks to me condescendingly and tells me just to go back to my room. I'm always in my room, and just tells me to shut up. He starts threatening and speaking to me as if he has any power over me. But the scary thing is how calm and poisonous his tone is. He isn't affected by any of the words I'm saying, and has zero respect to me as a big sister. I'm not demanding any respect, but he doesn't have that love and care we other siblings have for each other. I've always started to notice how he says whatever the heck he wanted, and then makes it into a joke with a cheeky smile. When my dad was going to visit grandma, he told the rest of the family, "He's just waiting on grandparents to die, then he'll be back." I mean, who the frick says that? This was a bit much, but the road my brother is headed on is not a good one, and I'm truly scared for his future. I tried to be a good mother, really, I did. But looking back, the deck was pretty stacked against us from the start. Me and my son grew up poor, and I mean really poor, in the back end of nowhere, and I had to work all the time. I was basically a slave. I certainly got treated like one. For childcare, like I could afford that, I used to leave my boy with the owner of the local store. A fat Jewish guy I got to know, and he did his best looking after him in exchange for the little guy helping out. I suppose it was child labor, but what can you do? One day, I got lucky when some rich out-of-towners suffered a breakdown on the edge of town and came into the store looking for help. They were really impressed by my son's resourcefulness and know-how, and they were obviously upset at his potential being squandered. So they offered to fund his education. The only catch was that it would have to be at a boarding school because there was no schools nearby worth a damn. I knew I would miss him like hell, but this was his big chance and I jumped at it. But when he came back, gosh, how he had changed. The next time I saw him, I'd been kidnapped by sand people, and my sweet boy, who wouldn't hurt a fly when he was young, killed every single one with this lightsaber some idiot had given him. Men, women, and the children too, and he slaughtered them like animals. Shaking my damn head. I won't lie, when I got to the punchline here, I was equal parts livid and exasperated. Well done. Well, I had to read it, and now you have to listen, subscribers. Have fun. Love, the narrator. When my youngest moved out, I had always had difficulty with her, but once she was gone, I realized how much of a bully she is. Recently, she got angry when my partner told her to not guilt-trip me, and flipped out and called him scum of the earth, telling me I am a bad mum for being with him when he is so awful to her, saying really horrible things about his children. The thing is that my sweetie is incredible, and everyone loves him, except her because he called her out on her bullcrap and stood up for me. I can't even tell you how many times I've cried because of things she's said or done. My oldest daughter is a sweetheart and they are polar opposites. I'm concerned there are some mental health issues right now because she has increased her behaviors. Unfortunately, she's off on her own, so I can't do anything but ask her to talk to someone. When she looked me dead in the eyes and poured out her cup of orange juice on the ground. It's age-appropriate boundary exploration, but still monstrous. My son asked me how long he was obligated to interact with me. Well, if you're forcing him to spend time with you, that's a valid question. True. Hated it when my mum would force me to do something I don't like. This seems like a common parenting mistake. Parents start feeling their child is too distant, so they make the whole problem worse by insisting that their child stop doing everything they enjoy and instead do something they hate with their parents. Camping trips, card games, etc. In reality, all this does is reinforce to the child that the parent doesn't care about them. If parents really wanted to grow their relationships with their kids, they've got 3 options. Learn about their hobbies, and see if they're receptive to talking about it and/or doing their hobbies with you. If your kid plays a video game, try playing that video game, etc. Show your kids your own hobbies to see if they're interested. Maybe you play guitar or something, and that piques their interest. If not, don't force it on them. Learn to be okay with having a healthy distance between parent and child. If you squeeze too tightly, they'll want to rebel. Make it clear that you respect them and their boundaries, and then you'll have a much stronger foundation to build on once they're out of their rebellious teenage years. My son steals my wife's eyeglasses while she is reading on her phone. She can see up close fine, but anything past 3 feet is a complete blur. He knows this and knows he can get away with taking things off counters and drawing on things if she can't see him. He's 3. When my son's Tamagotchi died and I was sad because I realized I was the one taking care of it while he was at school and in bed. He abandoned his own Tamagotchi? F him. That's how you raise a quitter. This kid better be taking care of that Tamagotchi whether he wants to or not. Oh my god, he obviously needs to be sent to military school. We may have veered off topic slightly here, I'm just loving how hot and bothered the community was getting over proper Tamagotchi treatment. My sister is raising 2 monsters, my niece and nephew. The whole family knows, even their parents know, but neither of them wants to be a parent and discipline or give consequences for their monsters' actions. My nephew at 7 yelled at my sister at Subway when she asked him to pick out his chips. He screamed, "Shut up, you B-word! I want to frickin' choke you!" He then proceeded to kick the customer nearest to him in the back of the leg. My sister just laughed it off with a defeated, embarrassed look on her face. At my daughter's 3rd birthday party, my niece, 8 at the time, realized she was wearing the jeans she doesn't like, screamed over the birthday song at her parents, and told them to fix it immediately. Well, they couldn't, they had no change of clothes. She flipped out, grabbed the birthday cake, and threw it on the ground, then ripped her pants off, threw a present on the ground, and stomped all over it. No apology, no consequences. My sister offered to pay to replace the gift. I told her I'd rather she pay to send her kids to therapy. She called me a C-word and said I didn't love my niece and nephew. They're in their teens now and still throw fits if you don't do what they want or let them win, etc. When my brother had his son, Monster Nephew started beating him up around 3. Monster was 9. Monster gave the little boy a black eye. This was the only time he ever got his butt kicked, and after that it stopped. And the only people my monster niece and nephew are genuinely scared of and behave around are my African-American sister-in-law and my Mexican brother-in-law. They've never done anything to them, they're just not white. Anyway, we have secret family get-togethers without inviting them because they always ruin them. We honestly don't like living like this, but we also don't like spending X amount of hours listening to them whine, complain, and scream, and demand things while breaking and destroying our property. And you can't say anything to them and their parents won't say anything. It's upsetting. I dread their future. Not a parent, but a sibling. My sister has become a vain, selfish, unloving sociopath. She treats my mum as a slave, and my mum loves her too much to notice. My mum was talking to her, she got bored and said, quote, "You can leave now." My mum replied with something like, "You can't talk to me like that, you need to respect me," to which my sister replies, I have no respect for the B word that cleans my knickers. Leave. I'm in shock. If I said that to my mum, I'd be slapped, but she turns a blind eye to my sister. Not my son, but there was a kid in the playground that my kid was playing with. He was about 5 or 6. If he didn't get his own way, he started screaming and hitting other kids at the playground. I advised my son not to play with him or talk to him since he was being a little crapbag. I didn't say that to my kid. The kid's mum was in the playground but ignoring her son and loudly playing Pokemon Go. That kid is likely going to turn into a monster seemingly since he is ignored. My daughter wrote F you and Mama dies with her figure scratched on a piece of paper the other day when we wouldn't let her make lemonade. She's 8. She's gone on rages and destroyed her room before, including throwing furniture around. Not looking forward to her as a teenager.
She's in therapy, right?
Yes, under medication too. She's much less ragey than she used to be, but catch her when she's tired or in transition and it's still hit or miss. I feel bad for her, and you. I mean, we blame people with mental issues for being jerks, but that's like blaming a sick person for being sick. They need help, and we should give it to them. Good job being a trooper. I dated someone who was a terror as a child and even as a young adult in my earlier life. She is a very sweet and well-adjusted human being now. One of my best friends with a child of her own. There is hope. I do hope the kid gives her a run for her money. It's only fair. I was in court as a plaintiff waiting for my case. They did all the criminal stuff first. One of the cases was this high school senior who had beat the crap out of his 100-pound, 5-foot mum. She was crying as she was refusing to have him home on bail. She was scared of this kid. This was an upper-middle-class family, and the kid looked like he was on his way to a good college. She kept saying he did it every time he didn't get what he wanted. Judge sent him to Monmouth County Jail, not a nice place for an 18-year-old skinny neebish. Just imagine what's going to happen to him when his fellow inmates find out what he's in for. Oofed. This thread has been a real inflictor of whiplash between the funnier ones and the ones like this. Okay, I need a laugh break, so here's a funnier story. Not the parent, but a brother. When he went to the bathroom and practically fumigated the entire house. The only room that was safe was the basement bathroom, with the door shut and the fan on. He was laughing his butt off for over an hour. Ex-teacher here. My own kids are far from monsters, but I've met some. When I taught preschool, there was a kid who was banned from YMCA camps for his behavior, and they never banned someone before. He brought a plastic, thankfully, knife to school and threatened to cut all of us teachers. Told other kids he would burn their homes down after first setting fire to all their toys. He heard me calming another student who was afraid of bees and mentioning I'm allergic, but I've never been stung because I don't scare bees. He came up, told me he was going to put a wasp nest in my car, lock me in it, and watch me die. He was one of only 2 students expelled from that school in the 15+ years I've been associated with it. His mother still didn't realize her son was a monster. She said she ate lead paint when pregnant with him, but claimed he was just fine. Often parents just cannot or refuse to see their children for what they are. Not a parent, and I won't ever have kids for obvious reasons, but I was the monster. I'm not proud of what I've done, but I can't change the past. I lived with an abusive father who often beat my mother, my sister, and me. He was abusive, physically, beating us, and mentally. My mother said it started when I was 4 months old. My mother always tried to protect us, but wasn't always there. I lived in a home filled with hate and violence and never really learned what love or happiness was. I was a pretty violent child with a lot of anger issues. My mother told me I would often hit my grandmother or her, and when my sister was born, it was even worse. I hated her and wanted her dead because since she was there, I couldn't have nice things anymore. I was 3. I was the kind of child to throw a tantrum because I was not given the present I wanted for Christmas. When I had rooms full of toys and I would throw myself on the floor and scream or even hit people and break items, then act as if everything was normal. It took a turn when my best friend passed away. I was 6 and started being fascinated by death. I pushed my sister in the stairs and tried to kill her a few times. Now, I could have been helped if my mum had accepted that I had a problem, but she refused to think something might not be wrong. With the death of my friend, I was forced by school to see a psychiatrist who realized something was wrong and asked to see me again. I never returned as my mother just didn't want to face the truth. Growing up, I had a lot of anger issues and sent a few of my classmates to the hospital, but when questioned, I didn't remember what happened. It was around 16 my mother realized something was really wrong. I had an argument with her and hit her, then came back a few minutes later and wondered why she was mad. A few days later, my father had cornered me while I was doing the washing up. I grabbed a knife, and if my sister didn't see it and reacted, I know I would have stabbed him, even if I don't remember it. I remember my father screaming at me, but not the knife part. When I realized something was wrong, I asked to see a psychiatrist who told me I had an illness. Now I've changed a lot and seem like a normal person. I'm 23, really close to my sister, and I don't have anger issues anymore. I don't see my father anymore, and things seem to be good, except I don't really have feelings. I never did, but I still know what I did was bad. To all the parents out here, if your child acts in a way that is not normal, bring them to a psychiatrist. It's not something to be ashamed of, but someone that is ill won't change by himself. I'm not a parent and likely won't be due to medical conditions, but I fear my younger brother will likely turn into a monster. He's a self-entitled, uncaring, sociopathic, and frankly, violent little prick. He gets away with not doing his homework, playing video games constantly, and refuses to help my dad and I out with stuff. He doesn't do chores and is a lazy butthole. My dad, Lord save him, and I are at our wits' end. A little over a year ago, he threatened to slit my throat in a violent, anger-fueled rage, after hitting me over and over again, punching me in the stomach, and hitting me with a wooden dowel. After I told him to get off his game and do his homework, or I would turn off the internet until he did his homework. He's told me before, on many occasions, that he wished I was never born, that I should have died instead of Mum, who died 2 months prior to this, and that he hates my guts and wants me to die. He told me that if I told our dad, he would kill me and my cat in my sleep. When he was younger, he trapped my oldest cat, who's now since passed on due to old age, underneath the porch and didn't let us know until we found her 3 days later, alive, hungry, and dehydrated. He's thrown my youngest cat in the mud because he was bored and she was annoying him. He threw a book at our elderly dog because the dog was whining and being annoying. He has no care in the world but for himself and his 1.5-year-old cat. He's a monster through and through, and I dread the day my dad finally comes to his senses and sees what kind of monster we've had living in our house. Despite the grimness of this last post, posts like the next one give me hope that perhaps cases like this can be fixed. Not a parent, but the monster, I guess. Well, I got my crap together since college, but that was a crazy crap show before that. When I was really little, I used to not respect anyone, and I didn't understand any boundaries. For example, I destroyed everything that annoyed me and tortured little baby kittens to see how they react. Drowning, for example. My parents tried to teach me how to be responsible with living things, but it took 3 dead cats until I understood how to handle living things without murdering them. I really liked war and destroying stuff, painted weird stuff everywhere, peed into the plants in my room, and built weapons to destroy stuff. I also liked to hurt and terrify my classmates for fun. Went through some therapy, but it was mostly homeopathic crap and giving me those weird alcoholic drinks to calm your kid down. In secondary school, I spent a lot of time harassing the weird kid in our class that had no friends with a group of weird screw-ups. We were perverted as hell as well, and did a lot of dumb stuff in general. I started getting into video games in that time, and I thank God for it saved my insane butt, because in college I made friends through playing all day, and they helped me to understand how normal people behave. Now I got my act together, have tons of friends and a good job, and soon a pretty frickin' great girlfriend. But knowing what's normal and what's not is still a huge problem, especially in areas people don't talk much about, which always gets me in bad situations. I really don't know what my parents think of me, to be honest. They generally talk little and never told me I am proud or anything like that, which I understand, to be honest. I guess they are just happy I'm working on my crap. They could have told me earlier though. I mean, to this day, I had to work out my problems alone. They never talked directly like, hey, you've got to take care of these things. Maybe they don't want to accept the fact that I am indeed crazy.
Ex-cons of Reddit. What's the worst thing that happened to you while doing your time? Serious replies only, and some pretty messed up stuff ahead, so fair warning. Did 7 in Pennsylvania State Prison. Saw a guy who was accidentally cleared by psych to be in general population go out to yard to try to cut his own head off with the razor wire. It was morning yard, not a lot of people out, and he sprinted towards the fence as soon as he got out there. We all thought, oh crap, we've never seen someone try to get over these forests of razor wire, but then this guy turns around with his back right up against the fence, cops coming from 3 directions yelling into their radios, and he loops a circle of razor wire around his neck and starts sawing. A waterfall of blood. Cops froze, everyone froze. That was really unexpected. They told us he lived, but screw me if I know how. Since you're asking, it happened at SCI Somerset, down in the lower yard. Yes, most of the razor wire is up on top of the fence, but there's a single run about 8 feet up the face of the fence, maybe to just discourage you from testing out the rest of it. He found this one section in the corner of the yard where the fence makes a bend, where that run was sagging down enough he could reach up and grab it. I always thought the pain reflex of holding on to razor wire would have made him stop, but nope, The craziest part is that prison can be months and months of literally the same thing over and over, like everything's painted the same color, then that guy is over there trying to cut his head off. Oh wait, huh? Like that. And prison doctors suck so hard. Probably gave him ibuprofen and sent him on to the hospital. He did it because he was crazy. The first day I was assigned to a new unit after being sentenced, DUI 90 days. I got put in a 5-man cell. It wasn't my first time locked up and had been in the jail a few weeks, so I wasn't too nervous. The guys were cool to me all evening. All 4 had done time before in much worse prisons. They were all playing cards, and I didn't know the game, so I sat on my bunk reading. They started off saying weird, cryptic gay stuff, random stuff regarding Vaseline and who was cute on the block, etc. It ramps up over the course of an hour, then they start playing strip poker. Meanwhile, I've been hearing every word they say and studiously ignoring it. They got bored of being subtle and began saying awful stuff about screwing each other. I ignore everything, while secretly getting scared that they're going to do something to me. Eventually, all 4 got up, shirtless, and they trapped me on my top bunk and started grabbing at me. I yelled, "What the heck?" And they collapsed in laughter and spent the next 48 hours telling everyone who'd listen. TLDR, new guy in 5-man cell, they pretend they're gonna gangbang me. I suppose seeing people getting taken advantage of all the time and then not caring was the worst. New guys coming in and getting ripped off on trades and stuff. People with social/developmental issues just getting their food taken from them. Also, the psychology of people without goals gets weird. What was worst was just becoming part of that world. There are so many people there that have their rights taken away from them on a regular basis and don't care anymore. They choose to place value on being able to make others fear them. They stop thinking about the world beyond the walls and just get all wrapped up in the weird culture of the place. There was a day I was feeling proud of myself because I was running around organizing contraband trades, setting up poker games, and owning things like hardcover books and the only dice in the place. In that moment of pride, I realized I started to lose my mind. It's honestly hard to remember the months in there because most of the time, nothing's freaking happening. Nothing. You've read until you can't stand it. You've slept all you can. You can't play cards because your cellie is sleeping. So you stare at the ceiling and wait. It's so weird to realize you're doing the equivalent of time out for months. You're not waiting for 5 minutes, not waiting for 5 hours. You're waiting for a day that is months away. Just waiting. TLDR, it's like being in a DMV with a bunch of idiots and your number isn't up until next January. A user reminded me of the other thing that was awful on the human psyche. You're not really a person in there. You might have people that care about you on the outside, but they're still living their lives. The guys you play cards with are just trying to pass time, just like you. The officers don't care. You're just another pain in their neck. You just wear the same linen pajamas every day and just exist. 12 months on the inside. Very first day in prison. Very first day. I was in line for supper and this big guy comes up behind me, squeezes my butt, and whispers in my ear, "Are your panties wet?" Scared crapless, I turned around and the guy jumped back and said in a friendly tone, "Oh, my mistake, mate. I thought you were someone else," and left the line. I still laugh about it to this day, but during the time, it messed with me. Actually, he was a big solid who did honestly mistake me for his boy. I did 3.5 years in Texas prisons. I believe that the worst story I can recall was my first full day in a state jail facility, used as a transition center for up to 2 years before one is sent to a real prison in Texas. A guy came up to me asking if I smoked cigarettes. I didn't, but thought, why not? So he told me to head to the gym when that time came later that afternoon. We went to the gym and fired up a cigarette while we walked around the basketball court. As we were walking around the court, we approached the universal gym machine where a variety of people were using the various pieces to work out. The guy who offered me the cigarette advised me to follow him to the other side of the basketball court and to stay away from the universal gym. A few minutes later, a guy sat down and leaned back to do some bench press when 4 guys grabbed him, one on each arm and one on each leg. 2 other guys pull out cans of chili, or refried beans as both were available, in socks and proceed to hammer the guy in the face. The guy at the bench press had his face completely caved in. All I could think was, what have I gotten myself into? I also recall one other time when I was at the pre-release facility at the Beto unit where a guy had his face cut up with a box cutter and his throat slit over $20. The guy who died even had about $40 worth of cigarettes on him when he died. I never had anything happen to me directly per se. There were a few fights I got into over various things, usually disrespect. Processing in the LA County Jail just after the first showers. Everybody is lined up to proceed to the next stage of processing. We were told to leave our towels in a pile on the floor and step forward when your name is called. One Hispanic fellow was called but did not speak any English. He was still carrying his towel. The deputy commanded him to stop and leave his towel in the pile. He did not respond. One deputy used his taser on the dude while 2 others dropped knees on him. The guy was rolling on the floor screaming apologies in broken English and Spanish. The guy received 1 warning. A few of us tried asking other Hispanics to inform him of the rule before we got to the deputies, but no further effort was made. I realize this isn't the worst tale in this post, just goes to show that violence happens for totally silly reasons in jail/prison. Been in that shower line before. Nuts to butts, they scream at you. Smells like balls, sweat, and hangover. Worst imaginable place on earth. I remember I was housed in Old County, a dingy, cockroach-infested, overcrowded, dirty section of LA County. You could wait up to 5 days just for a bunk, just sleeping on a concrete floor, eating bologna sandwiches. No blankets, no pillow, nothing. Once my bunk was available, they took me upstairs with 10 other people in the gang module. The cells are tiny, built to fit 2 inmates that pack 6 to 7 guys in there. The 7th person has to sleep on the floor. You get showers every 2 days, so a lot of guys shower in the toilets. While we were in the holding area, I saw them take out a body wrapped in a set of bloody sheets with the bloodied bunk mat not far behind. Apparently he was a blood that was thrown into a cell with Crips. Freaking nuts. When I finally get to my cell, the gate slams shut behind me. 5 of the biggest, blackest dudes I've ever seen in my life. A huge graffiti piece on the cell said, "Rollin' 60s Crips." That's Compton for those of you that don't know. One of the gang members comes right to my face and asks, "What's your name, white boy? Is it Bubba? Ain't you all named Bubba?" I knew I was in for a wild ride. Luckily, things went pretty smooth. Minded my own business and didn't get anything sharp in my neck or blunt in my butt. Still one of the most insane places I've been in my life. Absolute mayhem. Did 4 years, 4 months in a prison in Colombia, South America. For most people that are sentenced to more than a year, prison becomes a vacuum cleaner that sucks up your savings, your marriage, and relationships. It is a really hard time for most. I was engaged at the time. She hung in there for about a year and we parted ways. For you, life screeches to a halt, while life rolls along on the outside. One interesting thing that happens is that prison is like a filter that sorts out who your friends really are and who are your real friends. It goes the same with family. Prison is also hard on you psychologically. You have time, a lot of time, to think. For most people, being left alone with their thoughts can be stressing. One thing that would reduce any tough guy into a quivering coward was the word remisión, which is the term used when they transfer convicted inmates to other prisons around the country. No one wanted that. It wasn't a good thing. While I was there were riots, got tear gassed a bunch of times. One time, the big boss gave the order that every cell block barricade themselves, and one cell block took a couple of guards prisoner. This was on the news and it was a big deal. They brought in the GRI, Group of Immediate Reaction, sort of a SWAT for prisons. These guys came seriously armed. When they ran in front of our cell block gate, all the guys ran into the cell block. Me and 2 other less experienced convicts stayed by the door watching, when one of them stood in front of the door and pointed his H&K MP5 at us. I don't know anything about guns, but the other inmates were calling it out. We put our arms in the air. The guy next to me starts screaming, "Don't shoot us, we are not armed." The other guys started praying, so I called out the same thing. "Please don't kill us." The GRI officers start yelling, "Shut up and pull your pants down." We do exactly that and we took our shirts off for good measure. The guy tells us to get on our knees, hands on top of our heads. We're only in that position briefly because shots ring out from another cell block. The guy and some others run toward the gunfire and me and 2 other guys run into the cell block. The first thing the prison does is cut off the power, phones, and electricity. We were on lockdown for 2 days. It was really intense and I really thought we were done for. One night, everyone is in bed sleeping when suddenly someone starts screaming in pain. I thought that someone was getting killed. I was scared out of my mind because you have nowhere to run and nowhere to go. But I started hearing people getting up and talking. It turned out that a roach crawled into the guy's ear. After that, it was toilet paper in your ears when you go to sleep. One day, a young kid got caught stealing some old guy's disposable razor. The old man was begging the houseman not to hit the kid, but it was too late. Examples have to be made. We all had to stand by and watch this poor kid get beat like an animal afterwards. I wasn't the only one with tears in my eyes. Another terrible thing was on visiting days, we would all bunch up at the gate of the cell block waiting for our visits. You would see a new inmate receive his visit and most would break into heart-wrenching sobs. That was hard to watch, mostly because you remember the day it happened to you. Mothers, wives, brothers, sisters, they were all heartbroken and it was your fault. It just sucked. I guess what I'm trying to say is that it wasn't just one thing, it was many. Sorry for the long post. I saw a guy with swastika tattoos on his body befriend a flamboyantly gay black man platonically. Turned my whole world upside down. Actually, for all I know, it could have been a flamboyantly black gay man. Either way, it was sweet. While waiting in jail to go to the PDC, there were 5 guys from my block that liked making people fight. They made up stories and stole things, and then would act like your buddy and say they found your stuff in this guy's bunk. I was warned about this. They finally targeted me and this guy twice my size. Luckily, he was warned too. They stole my deodorant, which is a prize where I was, and put it in his bunk. They told me where it was and I acted mad. Then we all went to his cell. The big guy looked at me and said, "You stole from me. No one steals from me." I winked at him and began lightly slapping him. He laughed and slapped lightly back. We both were yelling. Everyone laughed and I got my deodorant back. The 5 dudes saw we knew what they were up to and moved on to other new inmates. Even though everything worked out, I was secretly crapping and wetting myself to oblivion in my mind. I'm glad there's at least one wholesome post to separate all the awfulness. Did 3 weeks in county for basically being at the wrong place at the wrong time. I had just turned 18 and had never been in trouble, not even in school. I was interrogated in a small room by a huge undercover agent with the stash, who told me that they knew I was the ringleader and that he would make it his personal mission to see that I spent the rest of my life in jail. Did not know any details, so I said nothing. When I was put in a cell, my cellmate was a 6'2" bald Mexican gangster guy, and every night he would loudly pleasure himself while I clinched my thin bed sheets in fear of not sleeping until I knew for sure I no longer heard him. I was released for lack of evidence. Good times. I'm going to give you a family story. My cousin got into some cocaine and heroin problems shortly after his mother died. He did a robbery at knife point on a local shop where my brother now works. Anyway, he goes away for 10 years, serves 8, and was released 3 years ago. He has a wife and 2 kids and is doing really well, so happy ending. The story that comes to mind is during his 5th year, he is one of the longest serving members of the prison, short stay prison in England with only a few people serving sentences over 2 years. Anyway, he gets a guy living next to his cell and starts chatting with him in the cafeteria. They become friends, and after about 3 months, people think nothing of it. But 3 months after he arrives, the inmates break into the back office of the prison and find everyone's records. They found out my cousin's mate has been transferred to this prison because his last prison found out he was a kitty fiddler and he was moved for his safety. My cousin gets told flat out while at dinner one day, "So-and-so, he's been done for kitty fiddling. Do something or you both get it from us." Fearing his safety, my cousin goes over and whacks the guy straight in the jaw with the tray, breaks his jaw and a couple of teeth. My cousin proves he was not sympathizing with the kitty fiddler and didn't get his head kicked in, sent into solitary confinement for 2 weeks. This isn't something that happened to me, but it's something I observed while in. My life was uneventful in my time, which was only about 4 months, and only during nights because I had multiple releases. Anyway, our jail was divided into sides and floors. The higher up you were, the worse of an offender you were. 1L was the floor with the men with releases or protective custody. 1R was women. Up through 5R and L were serious violent offenders. 1L was 12 individual cells, about 5 by 8 feet, surrounded by a larger cage, 1 TV in the dead middle. Our floor got the new arrivals who mostly, myself included for the first 2 months, had to sleep on rubber mats in the floor. One day, a young black man whom I knew from childhood was moved onto our floor. He'd been in the system since about 12. He had finally been granted work release. The guards hated him. All the guards were white. They didn't pull any punches. This was the year 2000. He was about 19 at this time. The night they moved him in was uneventful. The next morning, his release was for 6 a.m. to be at work at a restaurant at 6:30. The overnight guard was a jerk who loved doing things like dropping our food or releasing us late or holding us for an extra inspection or whatever. That morning, he was too busy to let this inmate out until 9 a.m. Our only phone was collect, and he did, for whatever reason, turn it off that morning so none of us could use it. Kid finally gets out, his ride still waiting, and beats feet to work. They actually let him work till noon, at which point he came immediately back like he was supposed to, during which time they made him sit in the sally port for about 5 hours without food, water, or bathroom. So he gets in after dinner and goes back to his cell, pretty dejected but not being bad or disrespectful. The next morning, they do the same thing. He gets to work and the manager can't do much but fire him, so he comes straight back to work and calls his PO on the way, and she calls the jail to tell them that he won't need his release the next day. So he comes back on the floor and pretty much immediately gets on the phone with his lawyer and family trying to find a new job. Cue the big fat guard dog. She comes walking down the floor outside the second cage laughing, saying something like, "How was work, X?" To which he responds, "You know how it was." And she, I swear to God she says this, says something like, "Shoulda known a lazy N wouldn't go to work on time. Looks like you're going back upstairs with the rest of the monkeys." We're all kind of appalled that she'd say that, and we're all white dudes. So he says something like, "Don't you have anything better to do?" Which is of course what she was hoping for. "Lockdown," she says loudly, which is where we all go back to our cages or mats. We all abide. She gets on her walkie and says her close first left and locks us all in about 3 hours before normal time. He says something like, "You ain't gotta take it out on all these dudes. They didn't do nothing." And she says, "Shut up, inmate, on your knees." Now you have to remember that she's about 6 feet in front of him, and none of us can see because we're all in our cages. Only the cage next to him can see her really, because he's in the last cell. So she starts screaming at him, calling him names, making fun of him, nasty, nasty stuff. So he calls her a dog or something. She pulls out a can of bear spray and just hoses him down and the rest of us by proximity. Then she calls in the response team, which is just one dude and his dog, and they haul the kid out, not fighting, in cuffs and drag him away, leaving the rest of us to wheeze on pepper spray for the rest of the night. That was one story. I could tell you about the guy with the wheelchair or the littering guy or lots of stuff. Thanks everyone for your comments. I didn't expect this to get big. I feel like I've had a pretty wild life and I love talking about the crazy things I've done. 8-time felon Eagle Scout EMT with SAR dogs? Okay. I've worked in youth residential group homes, worked as a counselor, taught public school, had to restrain lots of folks, been stabbed by students, been deposed for very technical ADA-related issues in big lawsuits, and I'm happy to share about all of it because I think our stories could all be shared. For the record, I was originally charged with 28 felonies and something like 15 misdemeanors for breaking and entering. Effectively, the DA took every single unsolved B&E from the previous year and charged me with it. We couldn't afford the $10,000 my lawyer wanted to go to trial. That was after the $10,000 he charged just to represent me. So we took a plea bargain of 8 felonies and 3 groups, all B&E. I was supposed to receive 1 to 10 years in the state pen for each one, but the judge realized that things weren't what they seemed, and instead grouped the charges and sentenced me to 3 to 30, suspended it, and gave me 6 months in counting with releases for work, school, and community service. So I pretty much just spent the night in jail for 4 to 5 months. Really lucky and really not too bad. I won't say that I was innocent, but I also won't say that I was remotely guilty of what I was charged with or what I pled guilty to. My PO, that's another whole series of stories, decided that I was the poster child for reform and had me speak to her interns about recidivism and corrections, and then for an unknown reason decided I was bad and tried 3 times to revoke my probation, all unsuccessfully. I graduated with a 3.7 overall GPA in 2003. 8 months inside, and one instance always sticks out of my mind. I was running out of phone minutes and spending what precious time I had left talking to my child. We didn't get to talk as much as I liked, had unfortunately more important people to talk to. Lawyers, trying to find jobs for my release, etc. This jerk comes up. I need the phone. Hold on, man, I only got a couple minutes left. He takes the phone and slammed it into the crappy payphone holster and abruptly hung up on my daughter. Still breaks my heart because I cherish every minute I can have with her. I worked as a guard in a military prison for 4 years, and after reading the stories in here, I'm glad I didn't transition to federal corrections when I got out. The things I read about in here. I didn't see either, but my buddy witnessed 2 events. One where a guy in the labor yard took his shovel and full-on swung it into the side of a guy's face, shattered his jaw, and dropped like a sack. He lived. After his surgeries were done, he was transferred to a different facility. Another guy was an MP who was the arresting officer of an inmate. When the MP was sent to the jail, I don't remember what he did, probably some possession charge. We had a few prior MPs in the jail. He didn't remember the guy at all, but the inmate broke his jaw with an elbow coming out of the shower one day. His wasn't so bad off as the first guy. He stayed for the rest of his sentence, but was kept in a different block than the other inmate. The head cook was pimping out her female cooks to the inmates. Their families would wire money to the head cook, who would then get that inmate assigned to kitchen duties so she could screw the female cooks. As a result of this, we had to man an extra guard to stay in the kitchen at all times. The head cook was sent to Leavenworth, and the 2 she was pimping out were dishonorably discharged from the army. Outside of that, the worst altercation I've seen was 2 inmates fighting in a block and knocking the TV over. 40 inmates in the block collectively went, "Oh crap, no." And once the fight was over, they were all asking us to check on the TV and hoping it still worked. Didn't give a crap about the 2 bloody idiots we took to segregation. That TV though, fortunately it did still work. Put it back on its stand and plugged it back in and came right back up. The place I was at was mostly pretty laid back. We had a saying, it's 365 days of boredom with 5 days of excitement. It's worse than the hot days of summer and around Christmas. Tempers flare and everyone is depressed. Oh, there was also a time where a female guard was doing a block check and walked into the shower, which wasn't on, and found an inmate laying along the wall, head and neck on the floor, back and legs up the wall, pleasuring himself because he was trying to eat his own emission. She wrote him up for that. It was freaking hilarious to read that report. One guy had a heart attack in the rec yard. One of the inmates we had was a ranger medic. He was there because his chute line got stuck jumping from a plane and he shattered his jaw. Seems like there's a trend. And when he recovered, he had permanent jaw pain. Since he was a medic, he kept writing his own narcotic prescriptions so he wouldn't have to see the doctor, which is a big no-no. So he was sent to jail for drug abuse. Anyway, when the inmate had a heart attack in the rec yard, we sent a newbie private to run up to Delta Block for this inmate because he was the only one the guards knew had any experience with this kind of stuff. When the paramedics arrived, he gave a full account to them of everything that was going on and very well could have saved that guy's life. I spent a short amount of time in a county jail. The first morning, they came and handed out those small cardboard cereal boxes that come in variety packs. I remember wolfing down the cereal as I hadn't eaten in a day or 2 and was starving. They then came back around and served the milk. I was angry. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description too. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.